Welcome everyone to session 2 of the 8th annual IABS Stats Workshop. I'm Laura Pack. I am co-chairing today's session with Ryoja Lee from BMS. I'm from Resolute. Today's session is different in form and function from the other sessions in the workshop. Because today we're going to focus instead of on statistical applications, we'll focus on our profession itself. So today we have 7 mini talks from professionals who are at different points in their careers. Some are scientists, some are statisticians, some started out as scientists and learned statistics on the way. Some have even come over to the dark side and are practicing as statisticians or data scientists. Each today is going to speak about their career, what they do now, how they collaborate with other scientists and data modelers across the CMC space. So each speaker will have about 15 minutes, and we're going to go through those talks in succession. And then we'll take about a half-hour break and follow these talks with an extended panel with all of our speakers. So we'll hold questions for the panel. If you have questions while our speakers are talking, please drop them in the chat or jot them down, but we will hold the questions for the panel so we can get through all of the talks. Before I hand it off to our first speaker, I want to say thank you for joining us today. I am truly excited to have what I consider to be a vital conversation about who we are and our career journeys. These stories really show the importance of curiosity, dedication, cooperation, and you all have career stories. And so I'm sure you'll hear some of the themes that are in your own story as we hear from our speakers today. We hope that no matter where you are in your career, you leave here inspired to go seek out new opportunity. Go find a mentor, be a mentor. Say yes to someone who seeks you out for advice or with a new opportunity. Go find a new alliance and solve big problems together. Each of us grows. When we help each other grow, we all excel. So in closing, I just want to say that I think the future of data analytics in CMC is full of possibilities. When we learn from each other's career journeys, we build powerful collaborations. So let's do that today. And that will help shape the future for us now and for future generations of statisticians and scientists. With that, I will turn the floor over to our first speaker, Sian Ratcliffe from Biogen. Sian?
Good morning and good afternoon, folks. I am just going to open up my video. So I'm unable to do that because it says the host has stopped that. So I don't know if okay, here we go. Thank you. Lovely, thank you. Well, it's a real pleasure to be joining this meeting. This is actually my first time joining this meeting, and it's actually great to be part of a topic that's around career development and the opportunities in this field. And I do have a couple of slides that I'm just going to use as a more of a visual backdrop in a moment, and I sort of want to introduce myself first, and then I'll kind of run through a few of those slides. You'll have seen from my biography that I am at Biogen currently, and I head up 2 groups at Biogen. Actually, I'm very fortunate to have 2 great jobs. So I lead our global clinical operations team here at Biogen, and I also lead our analytics and data sciences team. And as Laura said in her introduction, there are a few of us who have become, I'd say, come to statistics and come to non-clinical statistics sort of later in life. That would be me. I'm definitely one of those here because in heading up our analytics and data sciences team. You know, this has been part of a career journey that across multiple different areas in clinical drug development in the biopharma industry. And I've landed in this space now and very much enjoying it. I'll take you through a couple of examples in my career momentarily where, you know, even though I've been in a number of different roles and a number of different functions, in many of those different functions have really been bringing an application of different approaches to data sciences. And so, you know, hopefully that'll give you a sense of, you know, really where, you know, analytics and data sciences approaches can be applied across multiple disciplines, but also where in CMC statistics that there are some great opportunities currently, especially with the nature of all the different therapeutic modalities that we're working on across the industry for new therapeutics. And with that, I do want to just open up and have a little backdrop, because it gives you something to look at rather than simply me. And I will use this schematic of drug development across the life cycle. If I can just get it in slideshow mode. If not, I'm going to just keep going. So hopefully you don't mind seeing the thumbnail on the side. So if we take the drug development life cycle all the way from idea through to approval, sort of throughout my career, I've worked in every stage of this drug development life cycle. I've worked in the early discovery space in research, supporting both safety pharmacology and toxicology to really evaluate the safety of molecules coming through in that space. I hope everybody is seeing the slide on the screen. And if you're seeing my calendar, do let me know via the chat. So in my career in safety pharmacology and toxicology, these were areas where not only were we applying data sciences to the analysis of our data in the moment in experiments to assess preclinical safety prior to moving into studies in humans. But also what we were doing at that point in time is looking at positive predictive value and future sort of the predictive power of those safety assessments to truly predict the advent of adverse events in the clinic, and or to determine mechanistic basis of adverse events as well, if they were going to occur, whether the target mediated or on target mediated. And you know, in that area, it employed an awful lot of data sciences and analytics approaches.
Sean, it seems like we're not seeing your slides still, or at least I'm not.
Thank you very much for saying that, and my apologies for this. This is not good because this. Thank you for saying that. I'm just going to do a quick. I'm screen sharing. Are you seeing anything? Just
it's just a black screen.
Just a black screen. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to do stop share first.
Yeah.
And I may well not do slides. I tell you what, I'm going to, just because I don't want to. Seem to be very frozen. Are you able to hear my audio?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you.
You can see me and you can hear me. Yeah, my apologies. And in my current role, we use Teams more than Zoom. So for some reason, it's not doing what I wanted it to do today. I will share my slides thereafter. There are only 2 slides, so you're not missing out too much. You can just, I'll use my hands to describe the drug development life cycle. Because I also don't want to take away from other colleagues who are going to describe their career journeys as well. So please bear with me then. Thank you for letting me know. And sort of as I move along the drug development life cycle in my own role, I've also worked throughout all phases of clinical development. Again, sort of throughout phase 1, 2, and 3, and 4 in a number of different roles. And the reason I'm sharing this again is because there's so many opportunities for the different application of different approaches. I'm a pharmacologist by background in my training, but I've held a number of different roles throughout my time in the industry. And in the clinical development arena, I've worked both as a clinician and leading and driving programs, and therefore the statistics that I've been using in those settings has largely been around the clinical trial statistics, but I've also held roles in safety. And again, this is where the application of different data sciences really helps support kind of the determination of a signal from noise. It helps determine mechanistic basis and or relationships, causal relationships, as well as deep contextual understanding by looking at an adverse event finding with biomarker findings, safety finding, other safety findings, lab values, and other parameters. And again, sort of throughout my time in clinical, I would say that I've had a very, very data-focused slant to how I've fulfilled those roles, and have led, implementation of clinical safety review processes, as well as adaptive safety modeling approaches during my time in those areas, as well as building out large scale data efforts to combine multiple different data sources, again, to sort of deeply understand sort of the systems pharmacology of certain events. And I'll land on the final sort of the latter stages, again, as we think about pharmaceutical operations and technology, or the pharmaceutical sciences area, or the CMC area, however it's termed in respective companies and parts of the industry. Again, these are parts of the business where we're really, with a number of different modalities, looking to improve yield rates, looking to improve the integrity of, capsids. If we're doing gene therapies, we're maybe looking at multiple different structures of antisense oligonucleotides to directly line up with stability. And we may be looking also at scale up of bioreactors for monoclonal antibodies, and being able to truly model out that scale up in maturity also helps us to be able to identify optimizing yield, as well as applying resourcing models. And if we work with potentially small molecules that may have different dissolution characteristics across different formulations, when we switch formulations and or locations of manufacture, being able to really apply a statistical framework and an analytic method in that setting enables us to sort of, be able to underpin sort of like dissolution studies and formulation characteristics. And we have some great examples from within my team here at Biogen, where actually we've been able to do that and use those in a regulatory setting. So, it's a little bit around sort of some of the different roles I've had, and the application of data sciences and analytics throughout. But one of the great opportunities I feel in my current role that I have is I head up our biostatistics group. Has a very unique group within it that focuses on non-clinical statistics application across this drug development life cycle. So I'm very pleased to be able to not only manage that team, but also through managing it in our analytics and data sciences group, we're able to really foster collaboration across multiple disciplines in data sciences. And through that collaboration, we're really able to bring a lot of innovation, both in technique, framework, and methodology. And I highlighted a few examples there for pharmaceutical operations and technology, but one of the things that my team has been able to do has been able to sort of deploy, use of our Shiny apps, for example, on the latter example I gave with dissolution characteristics, has been able to do that. And has had direct influence on our ability, again, to sort of scale up antisense oligonucleotides, working with our pharmaceutical operations and technology team. So, I am a true big believer in collaboration across disciplines, but also that collaboration across disciplines helps sort of break out of the well-trodden pathways that may be a traditional methodology and a traditional application in that area, by seeing a new use for something. And so, I think what you're going to hear from folks' career journeys today, again, is sort of taking maybe a traditional and a classic pathway and thinking of a new use for it, particularly in the area of CMC statistics. You may hear other examples of taking a use case first approach of looking at, okay, this is a problem that we have in the CMC space, and how can I solve it with a different approach that I may borrow from either a preclinical statistics area or a biomarker statistics area, or a translational sciences area. Or how can I apply the rigor of a clinical trial statistical framework potentially to this same use case? So, and all of those are examples that, I sort of consider myself very privileged across my career to have had the opportunity to do, and to work with colleagues who do this. You won't be able to see my next slide, so it's going to be a little bit hard to sort of follow this one. But before I hand over to my esteemed colleagues to run through their presentations, which hopefully will be a lot more smoother than mine ran, I do want to sort of acknowledge that in terms of different approaches and different methodological advances, some of the areas where there is even more opportunity when we look ahead. And I'll take a couple of examples in the machine learning and natural language processing space that, again, I think are there are great use cases in the CMC and pharmaceutical sciences arena, as well as the quality arena. And I can give one great example of where taking a text mining and natural language processing approach can truly help us look through quality findings. So if we think about quality findings, they're word dense, there's some data in them, but they're word dense. So if we think about the words and the content as the data, if we then apply a natural language processing approach to these, we can begin to look for themes and associations. We can begin to look for the relationship between those. And that gives us a great sense of not only where the first root cause of findings may be arising, but if we are looking at CAPAs, we can begin to look at if the corrective actions truly address the issues. And we can begin to see if the preventative actions are effective. And again, sort of this is a great way for us to sort of, apply something that's very different as an approach, but put it in the setting of a CMC statistics area. I have realized actually that all of my screens have frozen. So actually the time has frozen as well on my screens, and the time has not really frozen in real life. So my screen is telling me it's 10:09, and then the proper clock in my room is telling me it's 10:20. So my proper clock is telling me I have outstayed my welcome on screen as well, for which I sort of thank you for your patience in listening to me, especially without the backdrop of a visual. And I'll just simply land my presentation here and opening up is I hope that you all enjoy the session today. There may be some examples that are those scientific examples that you'll hear today, but this is a great opportunity to sort of think about career journeys in the industry, how those can take different pathways, how you can gather something along the way that you can bring to wherever you land. And hopefully also gives a sense of, the field of non-clinical statistics in CMC and pharmaceutical areas that will be, a great advantage and a great advance in the field, and will be a great sort of connection across both of those different fields. So thank you very much for your attention. I will try and do something to sort of unshare so that you don't see lingering things from my screens. And I will hand back to you, Laura.
Thank you, Sean. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you very much. And we will enjoy seeing you at the panel at 12:30. Thank you. Okay, I will introduce our next speaker. And Abby, I don't know if you'll run the recording. Our next speaker is Sang-Wook Choi from BMS.
Maddie's going to do that for us.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sang Choi. I'm working as a CMC biostatistician supporting cell and gene therapy at Bristol Myers Squibb. I'm delighted to talk about how I became a CMC biostatistician, and I am grateful to the IABS for this opportunity. This graphic is made to provide a brief overview of my career journey overlaid with a geographical journey. So I believe the skills that I acquired through academic training and the previous industrial experience made me a good fit for the current position in cell therapy. I received academic training in biochemical engineering in undergraduate and graduate schools, and I worked in semiconductor division at Samsung Electronics as a quality engineer, where I got involved in manufacturing and data analysis. I also worked at a couple of biotech startups for a short period of time. Finally, I joined the Juno Therapeutics in 2016, originally as a statistician in quality department. Then Juno was bought by Celgene in 2018. It was merged into BMS in 2019, where I belong to Global Biometrics and Data Sciences organization. Essentially, my career and geographical journey has taken me from South Korea and chemical engineering to the west coast of the USA, where I found my niche as a CMC biostatistician supporting next generation biotherapeutics. Let me start with a brief introduction to my academic background. I consider myself fortunate to have all my basic training in chemical engineering because chemical engineers are regarded as the most versatile of all engineers. Chemical engineers apply the principles of chemistry, biology, physics, and mathematics to solve the problem that involve the use of fuel, food, drugs, and many other chemical and biological products. So chemical engineering requires a broad understanding of a principle of basic sciences and multiple engineering disciplines, including material and computer sciences. After academic training, chemical engineering graduates go to diverse industries, including chemical, biotechnology, pharmaceutical, food, and information technology. I know a surprisingly large number of influential CMC statisticians also have academic training in chemical engineering. Process system engineering, PSE in short, is a specialization within chemical engineering. So PSE provides a systematic framework for the broad area of synthesis, design, control, simulation, and optimization of the processes and operations involving the complex chemical systems. It is an interdisciplinary field to provide a solution in different science and engineering domains. I think that approaching a problem within the context of large systems helped me build up a holistic systems of thinking. Pharmaceutical industry has long been dominated by small molecules using synthetic chemistry. It was revolutionized by the advent of biologics a few decades ago. Now, thanks to the genomic revolution, the third pillar of therapeutics has recently been added. So with the increasing complexity of the drug product, the uncertainty due to limited product understanding and the increasing regulatory and also business expectations are challenging for now. At the same time, the amount of data available has increased exponentially due to automation, digitalization, sensor, and robotics. Also, tools to solve scientific engineering problems such as algorithms, computer power, and the databases become more sophisticated. One of the popular set of algorithms is based on multivariate statistics. The analyzing a large number of data has drawn significant interest among chemical engineering practitioners. So my graduate research was to study multivariate process control monitoring for complex chemical processes, which are usually nonlinear and dynamic. So I proposed a process monitoring scheme based on the kernel principal component analysis for fault detection and the diagnosis. The graphic shows the mapping from the nonlinear input space to linear hyperspace where traditional dimension reduction techniques can be applied. Therefore, the monitoring metrics like totaling t-square and the squared prediction error can be used to monitor complex chemical processes. If you are interested in about the details, please refer to these peer-reviewed journal publications that are a result of my graduate study. After finishing my graduate study, I joined the semiconductor industry as a quality engineer. Here, a large number of data is collected from fabrication process, as well as a sequence of electrical packaging and quality tests. I got to apply my learnings from my graduate study and built multivariate process control in a photolithography processes. Also, I contributed to proposing in-house Samsung equivalence testing, which is to compare fabrication line to line and the product to product, etc. I also worked on developing automatic detection of faulty chips and faulty chip clusters on the wafer, and the customer failure prediction using time series modeling. So applying statistical methods to actual manufacturing and test data would add another layer of complexity. I gained first-hand experience with the practical problem-solving skills. This might be appearing a little detour in my career, but in reality, this was a stepping stone for me to get exposure to biotechnology. Before I worked at Samsung, I worked part-time in a biotechnology startup where I analyzed the cDNA microarray chips to classify cancer subtypes. Since then, I have maintained a keen interest in biology and bioinformatics. So I decided to go back to school at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, where I researched collective cell migration to study the mechanism of endothelial wound healing in acute lung injury. Among what I learned is a hands-on wet lab experience with the cells, bioassays, and microscopes. By the time of finishing my study at the UIUC, I was looking for a position where I could apply my data analysis and the cell biology skills. It came down to getting a job in biotech or pharmaceutical industry. As I briefly described, I have benefited from each stage of my career path by picking up valuable skills and knowledge. Together with my natural affinity for mathematical modeling, so those skills made me a good fit for CMC biostat and cell therapy. Here at BMS, what I'm involved with currently and in the future would be to provide CMC statistical support for cell and gene therapy products. The autologous, the chimeric antigen receptor T cell products are personalized medicine and living drugs. One unique feature of those products is that the starting material comes from patients. The cell therapy production is a sequence of a biological process, and first, there is multiple sources of product availability, including starting material, multiple unit processes, and many analytical methods. As shown in this vein-to-vein schematic, the first step occurs in the clinic, and it involves leukapheresis, which is a process of selecting the white blood cells from patient blood. And the selected material is cryopreserved and shipped to a manufacturing site. At the manufacturing site, the main steps are the selection of T cells from leukapheresis materials, followed by activation and the gene transfer into T cells and the expansion of CAR T cells to target those. And CAR T cells are finally formulated into the drug product. Then cryopreserved drug product is sent to the clinic for infusion to a patient. BMS is the only company who has two commercial products of CAR T with the different targets of CD19 and the BCMA in the European and the US markets. Also, BMS has a broad and diversified portfolio for now in the clinical trial that includes cell therapy products with a bispecific target, allogeneic cell therapy, and the products with manufacturing process optimization. I hope to continue working in a domain where it involves rapidly evolving sciences. For example, I routinely partner with the novel assay subject matter experts, for example, for flow cytometry shown on the top right, and the real-time PCR shown on the bottom right. So due to personalized nature of autologous CAR T, lack of the historical knowledge and the experience of therapy of a similar class, and evolving regulatory guidance, we keep dealing with many challenges on product development. Finally, I would like to emphasize that the collaboration is a key to success here. So CMC Biostats in cell therapy at BMS has collaboration within and outside the quantitative sciences. We work with the clinical stats and the data sciences teams within the quantitative science organization, and also work with outside the other functions such as product process development, regulatory, and the clinical development team. There's a never dull moment. Every day is a new challenge here in cell therapy at BMS. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Sangwook. I really appreciate hearing your story. And thanks, Abby, for running the recording. Our next speaker is Jeff Gardner from Data Farm Statistical and Data Management. Jeff, the floor is yours.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can. Is your camera on? I'm not sure that I can.
There we go. All right.
Find your face. All right, there you are. All right.
All right. So one technical detail, I'm hearing my own voice playing back in my head. It's throwing me off, and I'm not sure why.
Hey, you're coming through crystal clear for me. So you look good. You sound good. You're go.
All right. Well, I'll do my best to ignore this echo in my ear and work through this. So thank you everyone for your time this morning and for listening to my story. Hold on one second. I can't work through this. Where is?
Maybe remove your headset and just, I don't know if you've got a mic on your computer and just do it directly with the computer. We can't hear you anymore.
Okay, so that didn't work. All right, hold on one second. More time. Yeah. Oh, you know why? I know what the problem is. What's my PIN? My participant ID.
Maddie, do you have that?
We all have the same participant ID. Do you want me to share it with you?
Because the problem is that I'm connected with both my PC and my phone.
Oh,
The
okay.
audio
Yeah.
usually
So you're
reflects on my
hearing
phone.
it's echoing. Yeah, that's correct.
And usually you can see it next to your name, but for no reason I'm not.
Maddie, do you have it?
Yeah, let me just.
I have it here, the passcode.
You
No,
need
no,
the
my
meeting
personal
ID.
ID.
Oh,
Oh,
the
I
we,
don't know why I can't.
there
see
is no personal
no
idea
blank.
for this meeting.
Okay.
It's just a meeting ID because it's just a Zoom meeting.
Do you have it, Maddie? I have it here in front of me, 892.
That's the meeting of the idea. Yeah.
892-0768.
Yeah, that's not it.
2985.
Hold on one second. Okay. All right. So I know what to do. I'll work it through. It's weird that I can't see that ID, but I can work it.
Did you get it
So-
figured, Jeff? Are you gonna make it?
I'll work it out. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm flexible.
Okay.
So apologies for that. Let me thank everyone again for your time and listening to me share my personal story. One of the ideas that I had this morning was rather than go through my story in chronological fashion, I wanted to go in great detail about a particular chapter in my career, in my journey, that I found or considered to be perhaps most formative in terms of my philosophy about how I approach my personal career, my professional career. And my hope in sharing this detailed chapter of my life helps those of you who are still students and kind of early in your careers, help you achieve some clarity with respect to determining the type of practitioner that you would like to become. And this assumes, of course, that in some way you've already committed to be a career in quantitative science / statistics. Otherwise, I don't think you'd be here this morning. So to kind of set the table, I'm going to engage in a very broad generalization. And I realize that 2022, you have to be very careful in generalizing, but I'm going to do so anyway. And in doing so, what I like to do is broadly divide statisticians and other similar types of quantitative science practitioners into two types of camps or personalities. There is one camp that I refer to as the abstract practitioner. And this is a person who is highly adept at working with mathematical and statistical theory to solve problems. And this may include a high proficiency in computer programming or data science to solve problems. This person tends to prefer working in an environment that allows them to be deeply contemplative as they work out solutions. So that's camp number one. Camp number two, I like to call the tactile practitioner. They have some of these skill sets of the other camp, the abstract camp, but they also tend to be very comfortable working in environments that require them to get their hands dirty and be very hands-on and working through the mundane details necessary to solve a problem, particularly in a manufacturing or industrial environment. And this kind of person who likes to get their hands dirty may also be very adept at coordinating their activities with the people around them so as to get the collective operating at a higher level. And so having made that broad generalization between those two camps, I'd like to declare up front that philosophically, I'm very much in that second tactile practitioner camp as opposed to the first. Not that I have any problem with the first, I like that too, but what really gets me going and what I find to be most rewarding is to play in that second space. And what I like to therefore do is explain a little bit of detail with respect to a key point in my personal life that really pushed me into that camp or helped me solidify my position in that practitioner camp, as I like to call it. Almost 29 years ago to the day, I began a job as a laboratory technician within the R&D lab of a manufacturer of aerospace coatings. So this company was responsible for making primers, top coats, and other kinds of specialty coatings that would go on airplanes, and even in some cases, defense equipment and space vehicles. And my role directly supported a team of R&D chemists who were charged with developing new products. And I mainly worked with one chemist in particular whose specialty happened to be primers and developing primers. And I served as this chemist's personal assistant. And in doing so, I was responsible for a wide range of activities. I had to go through and order all the raw materials that we would use to make batches of paint in the laboratory: resins, powders, solvents, additives, all kinds of things. I had to maintain all the hardware supplies that we use in doing our day-to-day work in that laboratory. I had to maintain the equipment that we would use. There were these pieces of equipment like drill presses that had mixer blades that you would attach to them in order to make a batch. I had to maintain all of those, keep them running. Very interesting kind of experience there. I had to execute experiments in conjunction with the chemist that I supported. So he would lay out a series of experimental batches that we needed to have made and apply them to some kind of metal substrate for application and test them. So I had to make all those experimental batches, provide feedback when I started to encounter challenges in making them. For example, I might be making a batch very similar to like what you're doing when you're baking a cake in the kitchen. You got the blade going, but all of a sudden the material gets highly viscous, and now you got to add extra solvent, and you're trying to keep things going. But in reality, while you're doing that, you're throwing new variation into the experiment. So you have to be very meticulous and careful about recording how much extra solvent you're adding at a particular point and what other observations. Very rich experience in terms of trying to, as much as possible, account for every detail that went into the making of a particular batch that might have in turn affected its performance. Once I made those batches, I should say, I would go and spray them on various metal swatches, as it were, and perform all kinds of different testing for adhesion, for color precision, for long-term salt exposure and corrosion, all kinds of different things. And again, I would provide the feedback and record data from the measurements that I made over the course of that testing to the chemists that I supported. And what was most impactful to me about this experience was that as I was doing so, I didn't realize it at the time, but years later, I realized that I was actually executing in real time principles of statistical design of experiments. I was executing screening studies using factorial designs. There probably were some split plot designs, some optimization work that was done there. And while I was working that job, I never was privy to any of the data analysis. So I'm sure there were some elements of regression analysis and ANOVAs and other kinds of things that my chemist was using to guide his process in arriving at his final formulation of a given product. I was never privy to any of that. And so while it would seem initially like that would be the entry point to statistics, what actually was most informative for me with respect to my statistical background was the drudgery of everything that I had to do in that space. To kind of elaborate, the repetitive nature of making batch after batch after batch of the same thing and recording the data from that. It gets boring. It grated my nerves, but it was a very necessary activity. The repetitive testing and being challenged about accurately recording measurements and related circumstances if anything unusual took place. Also, in the middle of making a batch, having the flexibility and intrepid qualities necessary to address unanticipated problems that would arise and having to do so in a short period of time using limited available resources. And then also, just to kind of provide a humorous note, there was one particular memory I'll never forget, where I literally am dragging a mop across the asphalt in the middle of a parking lot to clean up a paint spill in plain view of all the executives and managerial office suite, because I had no means of properly securing a critical batch of product that I made in a pilot plant and had to transport over to another facility that was disconnected, right? And so literally there was a woman who drove by and said, "Is he mopping the parking lot?" "Yes, I am. It's embarrassing. Go away." So things like that, that experience, that background, it was very impactful for me because it gave me a real sense of the importance of that work and the personal toll that working in that environment can have on you, and how that in turn impacts the data, the quality of the work that you do while working in that environment. So some years later, after having completed undergraduate studies and landing my first job as a statistician at an API manufacturing facility, someone during a meeting remarked about how amazed they were at my ability to intuit potential root causes underlying a manufacturing issue that we were trying to solve, and the mechanism/dynamics by which that root cause would play itself out, including the human element of that root cause. And I was able to articulate this by viewing nothing more than a series of numbers and graphs on a screen, and I'm interpreting that in terms of my own real lived experience, not really being fully conscious of what I was doing until this person brought it up. And it was at that point that I realized how important my earlier lab tech days were in preparing me for that professional challenge, working as an applied industrial statistician. And furthermore, how that background apparently made me unique among statisticians, because according to my clients, at least, I understood things, and perhaps more critically was able to explain things in a way, in a manner and language that was native to their world, the world that they worked in and day out. And again, this includes understanding the psychological and emotional toll of working in certain environments, and how that in turn can impact process performance and product quality. So that experience and that feedback inspired confidence from my clients, and that translated into being granted professional opportunities, which to this day still produce significant dividends. And I mean that in the most literal manner possible. And so to wrap up that first point, I would say that the importance of working in an industrial environment cannot be understated in terms of enhancing your value as a statistician. But you also, if you're at the early point in your career, need to consider whether that kind of applied tactile experience, as I describe it, is something that aligns well with how you are wired, or if that's something that totally turns you off. And it's totally understandable it does turn you off, but you should consider whether that does or does not work for you. And if it can work for you, by all means, it can be a pivotal springboard to launch you into opportunities that would otherwise may not be available to you. So that's point number one that I like to make. The second point that I like to make is somewhat related based on that same experience. One of the things that I realized over the course of time is that the pace of work that takes place in an industrial environment where the emphasis is on maximizing sellable output necessitates kind of a change in thinking about how to go about solving problems. When you're at a desk in an office, at a table in a library, you've got time to deliberate. You've got time to consider multiple approaches for solving a problem and weighing the pros and cons of each. And you even have some time to develop rigorous tests or challenge cases with which to vet those different approaches that you're considering. But when you're on a manufacturing line, when you're in a QC lab, time switches from being an asset to a liability. And in that environment, you need solutions quickly. They don't need to be perfect, they just need to be effective. And this can be a challenge for some people who get flustered when they're required to move with a certain urgency and don't have the ability to think in a most comfortable way about the challenge or the problem that they're trying to solve. What I found is that when working in this environment, more often than not, you come up with a solution that's effective, you implement it, it saves the day, and just as quickly, it's forgotten under the barrage of new concerns that are coming in right after it. And over the course of time, at least for me, I came to the realization that the how of it all is so much or less important than the outcome of it all. So philosophically, it sounds like I'm almost saying the end justifies the means, and that's not what I'm saying, because in reality, when you're implementing solutions in that kind of environment, that fast-paced environment, you're implementing solutions that can't jeopardize people's safety. They can't create new problems. They can't nullify the profitability of the work product. So there's still criteria to be met there. But when I consider, my parents, for example, and the high school level education that they had and how they utilized their gut instinct and resourcefulness to solve household problems, years later, when I worked in this industrial context, it took me all the way back to the basic lessons my dad was teaching me when I was a boy, who is constantly trying to get me to figure out solutions that are good enough to get you where you need to get to. That was how he would phrase it. And so I would say in summary that the two key things that I would encourage a person early in their career to think about is, which of these two spaces would you like to occupy? Are you more the abstract problem solving type, or are you more the tactile, get your hands dirty practitioner that likes to get in the trenches and really work out solutions at the ground level where the rubber meets the road? And I would say that industrial experience matters significantly, and that even if you're not willing to take on a job where you directly work in a manufacturing environment or in a QC lab environment or something like that, that experience is going to be valuable. If you're not willing to do that, at least make it a point then that if you have clients at some point that do work in those kind of environments, to immerse yourself regularly in their world and walk the floor with them and understand the reality that they're swimming in, so that you can gain a deeper appreciation for the subtle nuances of how their work is impacted, and then in turn how that work impacts the data that ultimately they're giving to you for interpretation, for problem solving, and for ultimately being able to deliver products to the market. And the last point that I would like to make is that as a result of working in that high-paced industrial setting, I came to arrive at a philosophy whereby pragmatism begs for simplicity. Simple solutions can be understood by the simple. And frankly, a lot of statistical methodologies can lead us in the opposite direction to more complex discussions and circumstances. And so this is a point where I'll readily confess, I may depart significantly from some of my colleagues here, because I'm almost suggesting that all the education that we go through and the mathematical rigor that we follow to develop all these different statistical methodologies ultimately don't matter. And that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying, and what I'm a very strong believer in, is that the best applied statistician, the best industrial statistician, is arguably that one who can consider whether when presented with option A and option B for two approaches in solving a problem, the extra effort and complexity that's associated with A, even though it might be elegant, is it really commensurate with the gains that you're going to get, as opposed to implementing the simpler option B? If you don't really have an appreciative gain in terms of the ultimate outcome from the problem that you solve, I don't know that I really see a whole lot of value in A, despite its elegance. And so that is something that I consider as well, and I have found to be an effective strategy in working as a statistician in the CMC space over the last 20 years or so that I have done so. So that's kind of like my personal story and my perspective on how one particular chapter of my life informed my career and how I went about approaching my work in the years to come. And I would offer that as something to think about as you make your own decisions in terms of how you'd like to position yourself within this industry.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate that experience and your story. I look forward to hearing more from you on the panel. Thank you so much. All right. I'm going to turn it over now to Sarah Byers from BMS.
Hi, let me get my screen shared. Okay, let me know if you cannot see, please. Otherwise, I will continue on.
We're good. You're good, Sarah. It's good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jeff, I just want to say I thought that was very interesting. I am new to the CMC world, so I maybe depart a little bit from the speakers so far. I've only been out of school for 3 years now and kind of luckily stumbled into the CMC world from the get-go. And so some of the things that you said I've already seen to kind of ring true, and also trying to figure out what camp I'm in. I feel like I'm in the middle at the moment, and something that I like the idea of being in the more tactile camp. But anyways, getting into introductions, as I mentioned, I'm Sarah Byers. I'm a senior scientist at BMS. I am within the SMART group, as we like to call ourselves, but stands for the Statistics, Modeling, Analytics, Reporting, and Trending. I've been at BMS a little over 3 years now, supporting CMC work. Specifically, I work within biologics development and process development. So I do and help out a lot with process characterization. So I do a lot of design and analysis of experiments, working directly with scientists and engineers. And prior to BMS, I did have a 1-year internship at the USDA Agricultural Research Service. And I'll talk a little bit more about that coming up, because my talk today is really very much a personal story of my journey through academia to get to where I am today, and what it's been like a little bit working with data scientists since I've gotten to BMS. But quickly, I have my PhD in biostatistics from the University of Georgia, or UGA, and I have my BS and MS in mathematics from the College of Charleston. And just because I don't know too many of you, this is my 3rd time attending the conference and 1st time speaking. Just some fun facts. Off to the right is my 4-legged coworker who likes to make uninvited video call appearances quite frequently these days. His name is Sammy. And in my free time, I am learning how to paint with watercolors and like traveling to new places and hiking. So I just thought I would share some fun pictures. So starting from the beginning, I went to college not knowing what I wanted to do. I thought business sounded useful. I was like, I can for sure do something with that. But so towards the end of my 1st year, I took an introductory statistics class, and that professor's enthusiasm, passion, and just excitement for statistics made me so excited. I enjoyed it so much, and so much so that I decided to change my major. I was like, this is what I enjoy, this is what I want to do. And so I went and declared my major as mathematics, because College of Charleston is a medium-sized liberal arts school, and so there is no statistics department. They just have the math department, and you can pick different tracks or focuses. So I clearly picked statistics as my focus. And towards the end of that degree, I truly anticipated being done with school at the end of this. I was like, okay, went to school, gonna go get a job now. And I was looking to see what was out there, but also I just really didn't know what my path was. So I applied for the master's program at College of Charleston as well, just in case. And this could be due to the factor of the times and the economy, as it still was kind of struggling back in 2011. But the best I could get out of undergrad was a completely unrelated job. It didn't use statistics, didn't use mathematics, didn't use anything of the sort, not even close. And I was kind of disappointed. And I enjoyed statistics and taking those classes so much. I was like, I actually want to use this in my daily life and my daily job. So I was like, I'm glad I applied to the master's program and went ahead and continued. I actually started the unrelated job and my master's at the same time, both right after graduating undergrad. I took as many statistics classes as possible because, again, this is still a degree in mathematics, and I didn't know much about academia. I think you'll see that along this journey. And maybe after the first semester, I did end up leaving the unrelated job, getting an assistantship at the school, working as a tutor, a supplemental instructor. And towards the end of my degree, I was actually an instructor of record for that same introductory statistics class that got me so excited and changed my course. So it was really a come full circle moment with that I thought was really cool. So towards the end of this degree, it was getting in the fall of 2012. I did graduate in December. So I was looking for jobs again, thought I was going to be done, but I was like, let me apply to PhD programs just in case, right? I was like, I don't really know what I want to do. I clearly didn't have a plan. And so being that, I'm graduating in the fall of 2012, I was like, I couldn't start any program anyway, so I needed a job. and looking what's out there. Again, staying in the Charleston area, I wasn't really looking outside of that. This time, after obtaining my master's, I was able to get a somewhat related position. So I was a math software content intern at a textbook company. So the little CD-ROMs that I don't know if come with textbooks or not anymore. I help proofread, test out, and even develop a couple homework problems that went along with the software and the textbooks. I was like, okay, this is semi-related. It was fun for a little while. And towards the end of it, like I was there about 8 months, I was like, I don't know if I would want to do this for a living. I kind of, it was a little boring for me personally. And I was like, it's not so exciting. There's not new challenges. So I was like, okay, I'm glad I applied to these PhD programs and decided to keep going. And I started my first year in 2013 in the statistics department. Again, I knew very little about academia and didn't really have much guidance. And getting there, completing the first year's coursework, it was very much a theoretical program. And I started to lose my joy and enthusiasm for statistics a little bit. And I was like, I don't know if this is the right path for me. So I went and talked to one of the professors there, and they told me about this new PhD program in the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics. So they were having a new PhD in biostatistics program. And they're like, this would be a little more applied. And I was like, okay. So I went and talked to some people over there. They ended up accepting me. And so my second year at UGA, I started in a new department, and I was going to be working on my PhD in biostatistics. This was definitely much more up my alley. It was a good combination of theoretical and applied, and it had an emphasis on both. And so I was like, this, you know, I enjoyed statistics again after switching. But during this time, I started an internship at the USDA Agricultural Research Service, and I got to actually work with researchers and clients who came with their agricultural needs, and also talking about, you know, chicken and how did it taste. So it was, I actually got to interface, you know, along with my supervisor at the time with these clients, get real data, run analyses, and solve problems. And if you can imagine, with agriculture, there's plots of lands, a lot of split plot, split plot, that type of analysis going on, and got to learn about sequencing, biomarkers a little more, and bioinformatics tools. It was just a really cool experience. And after that was over, I was kind of reflecting back upon that, and I was like, I could see myself doing something like this for a living. You know, I really enjoyed working with other people, having this collaboration, and, you know, feeling like I was doing something real that mattered. And along my PhD program, I also had various other assistantships regarding, you know, research for grants, which was, you know, more statistical in nature, not really collaborative. I also got to do some teaching type assistantships, as well as I also got to work with medical doctors and med students, and, you know, people with the Georgia Department of Health, and various things. And that was more collaborative. And I was like, okay, you know, I that kind of solidified that's what I wanted to do. So I definitely was industry minded from the beginning. And you can see at each path along the journey, I was ready to stop learning, or not stop learning, but, you know, stop my education and go into the workforce. And so I really was industry minded from the beginning. And towards the end of my PhD program, so I was looking at jobs and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Even though I had had these experiences at the USDA, at working with medical doctors, with these different collaborations, still the majority of my contacts were within academia and those that I was closest with. And it was something that, since they decided that the academic career path was for them, I didn't really have much guidance as to what industry to go into, where I could use my skills. I was like, upon face value, I was like, I know the pharmaceutical industry has clinical statistics, you know, clearly, but I was like, I don't know if that's the right path for me. I also know there's finance, there's advertising and marketing, but I was like, I don't know if that sounds interesting either. And so I think I kind of, to be honest, was a little narrow-minded. And so I decided to actually go look at specific job ads. So I was like, because I don't know what I want to do. So I just need to look more closely. And so I saw this ad for the BMS job boards. I just typed in statistician. Clearly, a lot of statistical things related to clinical trials came up, but I saw this job ad for late stage biologics process development statistician. I didn't know what barely any of the words in this job ad meant. However, I clicked on it anyways and saw that they mentioned design and analysis of experiments and working with scientists and engineers. And I was like, this seems really similar to what I did at the USDA ARS. And I was like, I really enjoyed that. So I applied, ended up getting the job, joining a very interdisciplinary team of upstream and downstream high throughput process development scientists, along with one data scientist. So I was the sole statistician in the group helping support process development. And it was very interesting and unique to where, I joined in and I was having so much to learn. Coming from an academic background, I had no idea what any of this stuff was, biologics, or really how any of this worked. And joining a team that, spoke a different language than me, basically, was an interesting experience. And then shortly thereafter joining, maybe 6 months or so, BMS and Heritage Celgene merged. And this is where there was some restructuring, and there was a group merge that consolidated some of the statistics related to biologics development in one group. So now I'm a part of a larger team that includes additional statisticians, and I'm very grateful for that. Having people who speak my same language while I'm still, to this day, learning very much about process development and speaking the scientists and engineers languages. And it's definitely led to increased opportunities. So I've learned more about the business along the way. But from joining, so my very first day, I was in a group with the data scientists, and now being in this larger group, I've had more exposure and being here longer, working with a variety of data scientists. And I just put together some of, I think, my musings or things I thought was interesting thus far in my experience, is that we have both the same and differing language and terminology. So something, data scientists talk about features, whereas we talk about, coefficients or variables. And so making sure we're understanding each other. I know the terminology discussion came up a little bit yesterday just among statisticians, but I think we have to work just as hard communicating with scientists and engineers as we do with data scientists sometimes. And even though sometimes maybe we use the word bias, that is visible in both statistics and data science, is that, data scientists told me that linear models were high bias models. And my first thought was like, these aren't biased. Our coefficients are unbiased. We have theorems that we've shown to do this. And, it led to an interesting discussion. And I think that's something that data scientists do say, the linear models are high bias models. But they really are just meaning if we don't meet those assumptions that we're making, then our model is biased. So really making sure we're understanding each other. And overall too, we have both overlapping and different skills. Just a quick example of programming. I think I tend to be more functional, whereas I've noticed data scientists tend to use a more object-oriented paradigm. And is something that I have, it was a struggle for me to read and look through and understand, but I think it can be something that's actually very efficient. And depending on what project you're working on, maybe different styles are suited for different scenarios. I've actually led a project to automate reporting, and I've definitely learned a lot along the way. And I think as a trained statistician, I'm used to these small data sets and being given something, but really we had to create a database and a view for this project. So leveraging databases and their structures, not only for this project, but across other ones, and being able to get data to where we can do modeling and work in tandem for different projects is definitely something interesting. And overall, I wanted to point out too, I think this isn't an innate ability to me, but I've noticed data scientists, regardless of their background, whether it be, more lab turned data scientist, or, training by background of a data scientist. They're excellent storytellers, and I definitely think that's something I appreciate and want to learn from them. But overall, we can definitely do more and learn a lot when working together. And I'm very privileged to be in a collaborative team, and have enjoyed it thus far. But yep, that's all I have for today. Looking forward to talking to everyone in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate you sharing your story. Good to hear from a student that's just started out their career, and we'll look forward to hearing more on the panel. Our next speaker is Brandy Smith-Gutler from Merck.
Hello, I am Brandy Smith-Gutler, and as Laura said, I'm from Merck. I'm a data scientist. I've been in industry for 20 years, and I've been working as a data scientist for the last 4 years. And what I wanted to talk to you today about was I'm going to tell the story of my career, and then I was hoping to finish up and discuss how CMC statisticians and data scientists can work together. So I'm going to start from the very beginning and say that when I was going to college, I knew that I wanted to be either a scientist or an artist. And at the time, that seemed like two very different careers. Now, that I think about it, they're really not that different. But anyway, I am very geographically challenged. Okay. So when I was at orientation, I could not find the biology department, but I could find the chemistry department. So I found the chemistry department and I stayed there. And so my background is chemistry. I did ultimately find the biology department though, so don't worry about that because I also have an undergrad in biochemistry. But I was at a school where it's East Carolina University, where there was a well-known chemometrician. And so that is a field of analytical chemistry, if you're not familiar with that term. And I decided that I would, I was wanting to pursue a master's degree. And a lot of my peers were like, you don't want to work for that guy. He's crazy. He's going to work you to death, blah, 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 blah. And my rebellious nature in me said, I definitely want to work for that guy now. I really think that this is interesting. So I began with chemometrics, and I got my master's with that. And it essentially is multivariate statistics, but with chemical interpretation of the data, okay? Anyhow, being a chemometrician meant I did a lot of coding in MATLAB. I did have to do my dues where I did a lot of lab work, but I mostly was computer-based. I wrote programs to do, pattern recognition, genetic algorithms, and so forth. And I recall there was one night I was working late and I was doing some programming, and there was an inorganic chemistry professor that shared our suite. And he was also a late worker. He came into our lab and he had a very stinky, smelly chemical in an Erlenmeyer flask. And he goes, Brandy, I just wanted you to see this. I thought that, before you get a master's degree in chemistry, you should see a chemical. And I'm like, ha, 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 so funny, very funny. Anyway, it kind of got me a little bit thinking like, I really would like to continue chemistry and focus on maybe, more of a lab-based type of career. So I ended up going and getting a PhD, also in analytical chemistry, but my focus area was spectroscopy, so vibrational spectroscopy. And vibrational spectroscopy is kind of cool because it's big data, because you have lots of wave numbers or features as a data science, I would call. Sarah had mentioned that. I guess the translation would be variables or coefficients. But anyway, when I was working in my career as a spectroscopist, my research advisor was not familiar with chemometrics at all. And he was not necessarily impressed with it at the beginning. And I would joke with him because he was more of a physical chemistry background and loved doing these, week-long molecular dynamic calculations. And I had to do my dues and do those as well. I'm like, well, I can program, set it up and run a calculation for a week to, do a prediction of protein secondary structure. Or I can go down to our laser lab, I can take a near infrared spectrum, and then I can do partial least squares and predict what that could be. And I can do all that within an hour. So I finally kind of convinced him on the power of multivariate data analysis for spectroscopy and so forth. And now he's an advocate and he's always asking me about other things in regards to chemometrics. When I graduated, I went and worked at a biotech startup company. And what I found interesting about that was they hired me as a chemometrician. And here I'm like, I just spent the last 5 years in school to get another specialty, and you want me for chemometrics. But when I started working there, I realized that they were a bit confused because they actually wanted a chem informaticist, not a chemometrician. But I learned a lot there. I did a lot with metabolomics, which is another application area for chemometrics. Then I ended up going to GlaxoSmithKline, where I worked for about 3.5 years. And then I moved over to Merck, where I've been for 15 years. And when I first started, I was in process analytical chemistry. So I did a lot of, the manufacturing controls as part of that role. And I worked with the statistics department quite a bit for design of experiments, also for probability estimates, for sample size, and so forth. Because when you do continuous manufacturing, you don't have the guidelines of, oh, you just need to test 10 tablets to see if, your product's good enough. We actually had to, use statistics to figure out what we needed in regards to sampling and other types of analyses. And being in that type of group, it was a lot of fun. At first, I had a lab coat that had my name on it. I had a set of whites that also had my name on it. I had my steel toe shoes. I would drill holes into stainless steel equipment and put in instruments such that we could have real-time release testing or in-process control, such as feed-forward gates for good product versus bad product, all that kind of stuff. And it was a lot of fun, but I had told my manager at the time that if I had to do one more PLS model to predict concentration of a drug product using near infrared spectra, I was gonna go insane. I was like, I need to do something else. Let me do something different. Let me at least do like a support vector machine or some nonlinear stuff. And he's like, no, you need to continue doing what you're doing. So I talked to a great person that now is retired that was in the statistics department at Merck. And she had told me, have you thought about maybe, she's like, I can't hire you as a statistician. You're not a statistician. But have you thought about data science? And I'm like, well, what is that? And I was looking at the definition of it, and I was like, that sounds a lot like chemometrics, because I program stuff. I have, expertise in statistics and mathematics. And the other area would be domain knowledge. And my domain knowledge is I know chemistry and I know chemical manufacturing. So it seemed like a really good fit. And I had been doing AI and machine learning my entire career as a chemist. So why not change over to data scientist? I mean, if you think about it, back in the 80s, you would be called a computer programmer, but now you would be called a software developer. You know, it used to be called home economics, but now it's family and consumer sciences. So rather than a chemometrician, now I'm being called a data scientist. And it's pretty awesome because it pays a little bit better than being a chemist, but I digress. So with that said, that's how I came into being a data scientist. I also wanted to mention that when I became the data scientist, I was in a statistics group. So the statistics group had, of course, your statisticians, but there were a small group of us that focused on data science. And this kind of leads into my discussion regarding how CMC statisticians and data scientists can work together, okay? So the data science was just a small portion of this larger group. And the ways that we would work together were simply like, well, let me frame it as in, I'll tell you some things that I found that were different and some things that I found that were similar. So the first thing that I loved about being in a statistics group is learning that people give you data. Like, I don't have to go in the lab and collect the data myself. And I was like, that's amazing. People actually give you the data. So that was very different for me. One thing that was similar, though, is we both like to complain about the quality of the data that's given to us and the lack of forward thinking about how you're going to collect the data. I mean, if you have a large collection of artwork that you want to hang, you don't build it a round house to hang it in, right? So why can't we think before thinking of how we collect and store our data? Another thing that that I found different, and I also just would say that I organized a session for chemometrics and data science at a analytical chemistry conference. And I was laughing at one of the speaker's titles because he said, long data versus wide data. And so that was another thing that I, became accustomed to, because as a spectroscopist and chemometrician, I like really wide data, and I didn't understand the whole concept of long data. Like, what do you do with that? I would flip it to make it wide again. So that was something that's different, and I learned a fair amount. The other thing that I would say is, when I was working with the statistics group, is that it was really, there's a lot of do-it-yourself statisticians and data scientists, and there's nothing wrong with that. I was just in a kind of a mindset of, you did it all yourself, where you would, you did the DOE, you collected the data, I did the model, I would publish the model, I would take care of the model for its life cycle. And I just had learned from them that, you need to democratize data. You need to enable people to do these things. And if they need a specialist, they can always come and ask us. So my work with that group, we did a lot of joint training together. And, there's a lot of it. They do data science too, so it wasn't just me. But the thing that was, if we had a customer that wanted to do, PCA or PLS, like go see Brandy. If they wanted someone to do Bayesian modeling, then go see Catherine, who I believe is on the call, that gave a talk about Bayesian at this conference yesterday. Anyhow, so that's some of the things in that regards. I'm no longer in that group. They moved me into an IT group. So it's just interesting how we're a bit of an outlier, and they're just trying to figure out where the data scientists go. But this is just my experience, because I'm in the manufacturing division. But we have a data science symposium at Merck that covers all the divisions. And so what you might do as a data scientist in manufacturing is, the CMC work, but there's lots of different applications for it in human health and in our research and development. So, web scraping to find information about customers or drug pricing and so forth. I mean, I wouldn't do that, but those are other application areas for data science within the pharmaceutical industry. So I'm kind of approaching the end of my time. So I just wanted to close with just a few kind of thoughts that I've gathered. And that is I've learned that data and models or assets, they're not necessarily treated as such. I've in my experience, and I feel that whenever we've delivered a product, whether it be in a model or the data that it puts out, we might say, yeah, we've added value because we've saved time, or we cut down a lead time, or we cut down the an FTE. But what we should be thinking about is, unlike capital, our models and data should be appreciating over time, and that we need to think about telling and selling our work to say, having this model in place that does real-time release testing, it is on save this many batches, which equates to this many. With the technology we have today, we can also track all these things, like how many times has my model been deployed? How many batches has it saved? How many people have used it? How many sites are using it right now? To kind of calculate and show how much value we as data scientists can actually provide our companies. So with that said, I'm at my time, and I just wanted to say thank you for having me. I hope I was interesting. But anyway, thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you for sharing your story, and we will look forward to seeing you on the panel. Our next speaker is Jonathan Ross from Resolute. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you. Can everyone see my slides in presentation mode?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So my name is Jonathan Ross. I'm currently the Associate Director of Manufacturing Sciences and Technology for upstream drug substance at Resolute Bio. I have over 7 years of experience focusing primarily on process characterization for monoclonal antibody development. I have a Bachelor's of Arts in Biology from Willamette University, and am actively pursuing a Master's in Applied Statistics from Colorado State University. My career path really started in 2015, once I graduated from Willamette University with my degree in biology. For a long time, I wanted to be a scientist. I had a career goal that I wanted to help patients with cancer. This stemmed from, growing up and seeing how cancer affected my family, and just the nasty treatments that were available. And I wanted to help the cause and make better treatments. But also, seeing this, I figured the only thing I could do to help people with cancer was to become a scientist and to study the sciences. So that's where in 2015, I started a career as a research associate at CGen. Where I was in the cell culture group, this moved on to, I started to learn and have a collaboration with CMC statisticians, and actually started a mentorship with a CMC statistician, which helped me take more undergraduate courses and start the master's program, which helped me get to where I am today as the associate director of MSAT at Resolute. These milestones have changed how I view and execute tasks such as experimental designs, parameter selection, and presentation of results. So starting in 2015, I was able to obtain my first job out of college within the cell culture process development lab at Seagen. For those who don't know, Seagen is a biotech company focusing on antibody drug conjugates as a treatment for cancer. My focus was on maintaining CHO cell culture with my everyday tasks, including media preparation, cell expansion, bioreactor maintenance, and cell banking. While in this role, I was introduced to statistical tools to help aid in my execution of experiments. The most utilized tool in my role was design of experiments, as I had to learn to balance scientific curiosity with resources. As much as I wanted to understand what happened at every condition, this wasn't feasible as my experiments were taking approximately 36 days to complete, and running more than 12 bioreactors at a time was resource intensive. Also, my analytical colleagues who analyzed all my samples would not like to receive a full factorial design of all the conditions, as that would be an unreasonable number of samples. Through utilizing design of experiments, I was able to reduce the amount of lab work I had to perform while creating useful statistical models to extrapolate the untested conditions. However, by learning the basics of design of experiments, I started to become curious and ask my CMC statistician questions to learn more. Probably one of the first instances of me wanting to learn more was I had ran a DOE evaluating different raw material lots. So I had several categorical variables, and I had just analyzed this using a linear model and came up with a conclusion that the models were useless, and there was the varying raw material lots didn't have any impact on my CQAs. But my CMC statistician was able to help me create a random effects model, which I had never heard of, to help explain what proportion of variability was explained by each lot of raw materials, which was a lot more useful of a model. But by asking questions with the CMC statistician, they started to help me understand the jump output fully, and then help explain what the different optimality criterions were for different designs. Through asking these questions, the CMC statistician helped me grow and provided me resources for pushed me to learn more. Probably the most important thing that my CMC statistician mentor did for me was to taper the resources to kind of prevent me from jumping in feet first and becoming overwhelmed. She did this by just answering my questions first, and then she provided some resources like papers and some day-long trainings provided by JUMP before really pushing me to pursue a master's in applied statistics while working. I think this tapered approach really worked well for me, as I was able to manage work life and school better. So my next milestone is applying for and getting into the Master's of Applied Statistics program. So once I decided that I wanted to pursue this, I needed to really learn how to manage school, work, and life. As I mentioned previously, I was doing more on my own time to aid in my professional growth. To understand the impacts of school to my everyday life and to apply for the program, I was required to take 2 undergraduate courses, which were multivariate calculus and linear algebra, which really helped me understand the important aspects of my life and what I was willing to give up to pursue further education and what I was not. This also helped me because I took both of these classes online, so it helped me understand how doing classes online was really going to, whether I was going to like doing it or not, before I jumped into a full master's program. But once I did get into the master's program, I had a very clear goal. I wanted to add more tools to my toolbox and sharpen the tools I already had. The schoolwork has helped me learn new analyses such as linear mixed models and principal component analysis. But one of my favorite things about the program at Colorado State is that I'm able to utilize each class and apply my new skills almost immediately to my work. And another perk about going to school while working is learning kind of what I call the background skills. These skills that are things like R Markdown or R Shiny, which I learn more about in each course, but they're not the focus of the schoolwork. But by learning and applying these skills to work, I'm able to help create new efficiencies for items such as data organization and presentation. Lastly, I'm now confident in my ability to look at jump output and understand the meaning. Before I was, I understood that to reduce statistical models, you looked at the p-value, and if it's greater than 0.05, you can eliminate from the model, but that's about all I knew. Now I kind of understand, where this number is coming from and why I'm eliminating it from the model. And then lastly, within the entire CMC department, statistics is often an underutilized tool just based on the number of people who have a good understanding of what statistics are and what applications they can be used. But there's always a lot of curiosity about this. So, adding these tools really helps in my career growth as the industry needs more statisticians. So I'm currently at Resolute Bio. Resolute's a small company focusing on rare metabolic diseases, utilizing both large and small molecules as treatment. Because Resolute is a smaller company, we really need to maximize the information from limited data. In order to do this, we've really been utilizing statistics. In my current role at MSAT, it's not a statistics-based role, but relies both on statistical and industry expertise. I need to have knowledge to effectively design experiments to answer scientific questions while balancing business costs. One way I've done this is to utilize center points from DOE experiments to qualify scale down models and utilize future runs to check predictiveness of my statistical models. From my scientific background, I always ran things in a very stepwise fashion where I would have preferred to run a scaled down model experiment of just center points first before running a DOE, and then actually running a model verification experiment afterwards to make sure my model was accurately predicting my results. Some of the other activities I'm tasked with in this role is, creating a data sheet, collecting upstream process data from historical experiments and new experiments to be able to easily graph and analyze the data to help support manufacturing deviations or manufacturing issues. And then having a centralized data source allows for an easy place to grab and analyze the data. So, throughout my short career and with school, I've really, focused on what I call career growth. To me, there's kind of two buckets for career development, kind of career growth and professional growth. Professional growth, in my opinion, is to continue to learn and expand one's skills, while career growth is focused on job experience and kind of moving up the career ladder. For a long time, I only really focused on the career growth, moving up. I wanted to start as a research associate, become a scientist, but these didn't really align with my growing interests and passions in the field of data science and statistics. But through my lab work, I was able to discover a passion for statistics. Once I started my mentorship with the CMC statistician, I learned that to maximize my potential, I needed to merge what I'm interested in with my career. And then I really started to do this as a research associate by building tools, for data reprocessing and data organization and visualization. And then in my current job, I'm able to really utilize my statistics knowledge with, providing my expertise on design of experiments and data analysis. So now that I've found my passion for the field of statistics, I'm able to merge my passions and interests with my career to, help me enjoy my everyday work and really maximize my potential. And that's all I have. Thank you for your time and listening to my story.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you very much for sharing your story. We'll look forward to talking with you more on the panel. Our last speaker today is Tara Schroeder from Sonolo Stats. Tara, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Laura, and thanks for inviting me to speak today. And I notice I am the last one before lunch. So let's get this ball rolling. Just a second to share my screen here. It is really giving me, other people have had some
If-
trouble today with Zoom, but I'll
If you
get it,
want,
don't worry.
if you want, I'm happy to share them for you.
No,
Oh,
I'll get it. There we go.
We see your Outlook.
Do you see my, okay, still my Outlook. How strange is that, huh?
You need to have the slides open and then click on the
Yeah, they
share
are.
button. And
They
then
are.
select.
Yes. My slides are open, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put these over on my other screen so there's no issue, and share that other screen. Let's try that. Okay, I'll try this.
Yes, we can see them.
Okay, but you are seeing, let's try this display settings to swap it. And now you are seeing what we should be
Perfect.
seeing. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. So I've only got a few slides to share with you today. And you'll see some commonalities, obviously, between my career journey and some of the people we've seen already. Mine will take us all the way through. I'm a consultant now, and I'll spend a little bit of time talking at the end about that and some comparisons, the challenges of being a consultant compared to my old days of working in a big pharma organization. So you can see I started out here with a BS in chemical engineering. I actually started my career, started my educational career in pharmacy school, and then I needed to switch from one university to the other. And it reminds me of, I couldn't find the biology department. I went to the chemical engineering department, and they were really nice to me, and they wanted me to join them. And the pharmacy department at the University of Pittsburgh was not very friendly. So as a 20-year-old, that made a difference in my choice. And I'm actually quite glad I went with a chemical engineering, as it turns out. So I started out with a chemical engineering degree. I worked a few years in the oil field. And then I moved into the chemical industry as a process engineer. And I was fortunate enough, in my job as a process engineer, largely working in a pilot plant. So like Jeff, my hands got very dirty because I was working in a pilot plant. But I was very fortunate here. You see this DOE blast right here. I was very fortunate to take a 1-week course with Doug Montgomery. If you want to take a DOE course with anybody in our industry, in industry in general, you know, he is the very well-known author and a very good trainer, obviously, and professor and so on. So I was very fortunate to take that course. I also, around the same time, took an industry course in statistical process control. And both of those courses were the turning point for me, where I realized, my goodness gracious, this stuff is so useful in my world as a process engineer. And that's why then I pursued a master's degree in statistics. I continued to work for that same, it was a water treatment company, as a process engineer for a few years, but then I moved into big pharma as a manufacturing statistician. I worked, as we've heard from multiple people so far in this conference, I worked for Merck. From this point forward to here, to where we are today, that's, I have to admit, I kind of hate to admit, this is over 20 years. So I've had over 20 years working in the pharmaceutical industry as what I like to call a CMC statistician, but I always include a CMC and manufacturing statistician, because much of my time was in the commercial supply stage of the product life cycle. So beyond, I did process development and specifications and so on, DOE, but I also did quite a lot once a product had been commercialized and maybe, was having some sort of issue. After I spent a number of years here in this as a manufacturing statistician, I moved into the corporate Lean Six Sigma training group. And what I gained here was really, I think, quite key to my way of approaching my projects in general. And that's because I always wear a lean hat. Not so much the Six Sigma part. In fact, I was coined the nickname of the anti-statistician in this group, because all the black belts always wanted to be applying hypothesis tests or regression. And my response was, why are you doing that? You don't need that to answer your question. Where's your, let's start first with a very simple graph and a process map. And has anybody walked the process, for instance, right? So I got the nickname of the anti-statistician, but what I really gained there was this concept of lean thinking and the idea of what we do for our customer and what is waste. And our customer, of course, is the patient. And so when I am thinking about a solution, a statistical solution, it has to incorporate this idea of, is something wasteful? Because waste isn't good for our business, but it's also ultimately, if we're spending time on wasteful activities, that means we're not spending time on value-added activities. And ultimately, that's not best for the patient. And then after I left this group, I moved into statistical consulting. I started with a small company of statisticians, pharmaceutical, CMC type statisticians. I left that company, formed a partnership for a few years, and now I'm an independent consultant. So Synalostats is I'm the principal and I'm the only person in it at this point. So why do I really, really like what I've done in my career? I would picture it like this. It's always a new sandbox with new playmates. And there are a lot of careers, most careers, I might say, don't provide, and I don't mean just statistical careers, I just mean general careers, may not provide as much variety as we get as CMC statisticians. So I can, I work in stability with my stability playmates, in process development and validation, method development and validation. I work in large molecule, small molecule. I work in root cause investigations, assuring commercial supply. So it's always, and I've heard this already from several of our speakers thus far, there's always something new. It doesn't get boring. And I think that's one reason why I have done pretty, similar, I've had a similar career, most of my career, where I'm just working through with a wide variety of groups, helping them to solve problems and meet business needs using statistics. So what if some of the challenges, excuse me, give me just a second here. Lingering cold, and then when you start talking, it just gets worse. What are some of the challenges along the way? So in the early days as a corporate statistician, so remember I said this was about over 20 years ago, I started this journey as a corporate statistician. I might hear something as I went into a meeting, not so nice, really, quite blankly asked, why are you at our meeting? Why would you be here? So I learned very early on, I needed to show my value. I needed to persuade them that I could help them, that I wasn't I obviously wasn't the expert in their space of biology or chemistry, but I could help them with their data analysis. I would say at that time, the value of our work was less recognized compared to present day. I think over the years, the industry, because of things like ICH Q8 and quality by design, the expectations of using things like designed experiments. I mean, I remember trying to convince researchers to use designed experiments, and they really didn't want to hear about it. And I mean, that's still the case. That's I think sometimes today, but certainly there's been a movement more toward, wow, you know, this statistical stuff really can help us to solve problems more efficiently and accurately. We were understaffed for sure. We supported there was 3 statisticians, and we supported all of Merck manufacturing worldwide in a group called Process and Systems Improvement. So you can imagine that we were understaffed and overworked. And in addition to that, our projects were often at the crisis stage. My boss said, we aren't really just the firefighters. We're the guys that the firefighters aren't working anymore, and they're dropping the the firefighters from the helicopters. So projects were often at a crisis stage because they might be an investigation, and the product was going to be in stock out stage, or it was a very high volume product worth could suffer a large loss if we didn't fix some problems. And at that time, you know, we all know that the CMC statistician population is small now, right? We all, so many of us know each other, or we know someone that works with someone. I mean, our population across the industry, even today, is quite small. Well, you can imagine 20 years ago, you know, 10 to 20 years ago, it was even smaller. And so there was less opportunity to gain experience from each other than there is now. So now, as an independent consultant, what are some of the challenges that I experience? So it's not so much about why are you at our meeting, because as an independent consultant, they've called you in, so they know why you're there. The question then becomes, and there was some discussion of this yesterday in the conference yesterday. Why do we need to do something? And I think it was the discussion was, can't remember if it was in the breakout or in the general session, but in any case, we talked about people saying, well, why do we need to do that? You really, as a consultant, you really have to show the value in business terms, and you have to do it quickly. You have to translate it, even if it's a very, very sophisticated statistical solution, rather complex, you really have to translate that quickly into business terms so they know why you're there. And how do you do that? Well, you must, you know, and we've heard this before from the speakers today and yesterday. You must have a reasonable understanding. Obviously, you're not an expert, but you must have a reasonable understanding of the process that you're talking about. And that includes the measurement process. If it's a manufacturing problem, the manufacturing process, critically, the business process. What are they trying to do? Are you writing an SOP? Are you determining shelf life? What is it? And what is it around that business process that you need to know? Because you will need to tailor your solution to that business process. And of course, part of that business in our world is the compliance process. Will the solution you're providing cause compliance issues? Because not everybody can follow through, or it'll be too difficult for a scientist to explain in an audit, or whatever that case might be, the compliance process. That means also, as a consulting statistician, because I consult across the full spectrum of all those sandboxes. I consult across all those sandboxes. That means I have to be really familiar with all the regulations as much as you can be when you're not, you know, when you do focus, when your focus is widespread. But you really do need to be able to talk about all those things, and it's expected when you're in those meetings. I have this saying that I not just think for myself, but also when I teach classes, I say to be the data. So we don't know, we're not the expert in that measurement process. We're not the expert in that manufacturing process. So we have to be the data. When a vial is made, how does it move from being made to the laboratory? when a tablet is compressed, is there intervention in that process? We have to be the data. That's how we have to learn enough about these processes to understand even whether some of our statistical solutions could be erroneous if we don't have enough information like that. And I mentioned this already, focus on the business benefit, the risk of the statistical activity. When they say, why do you need to do that? I throw it right back at them and say, well, if we don't, here's what could happen. You may find yourself, maybe not in this product, but if you put this in an SOP in your next product, you might find yourself in trouble being able to follow it. Or if we don't use 7 samples, this is what could happen. So there's always that leaving the statistical jargon out and really translating it to we're doing this. I heard someone mention yesterday. The idea is that statistics is around uncertainty. So translating this concept of, well, we're performing these things because we're trying to manage risk. We're trying to manage risk because of uncertainty. We don't have to even use those words, particularly risk. We generally do. We're managing a risk. Statistics is really about managing risk. Beware of unnecessary statistical jargon and Greek letters, for instance, right? So we may have an elegant solution that's really quite a complex model, but in our reports, for instance, that we provide to someone, we want to focus on that, potentially that executive summary, and understand what decision are they trying to make, and that should be first and foremost. That must be first and foremost. So that the client can really recognize your value. That the statistical models and all the Greek letters need to be there potentially, but they can be seen later on in an appendix of the statistical methods. So as an independent consultant, you have many balls in the air, people and projects. It's very fast paced. And the success depends on meeting the client requests. So there's less freedom to negotiate timing compared to a large company. I mean, don't get me wrong. As I said, in my company, when it was very fast paced when I worked in big pharma. If we were in a situation of a root cause investigation, but in a consulting world, it's generally very fast paced, less freedom to negotiate timing, which will, of course, leads to less real time off. You're always on. Or time for research and publications and such, because your first priority is meeting those client requests. And of course, we hear, not just as an independent consultant, back here as a corporate statistician too. I'm not a statistician, but I hear that a lot. And so managing that when we might recognize that they're a statistician, that they're not a statistician, and maybe the methods that they're choosing are not correct. How do you manage that without being in any way not contradictory, without being demeaning to the client? You really have to say, well, this is what could happen if we did it that way, and this is why we have to, this is the more appropriate way. And this is the best practice that's being done in industry. That's the other thing you really have to be familiar with when you're in a consultant. You really need to be aware of the best practices across industry, because that will help you. But also it helps from a compliance standpoint also for all the companies if they can say this is best practice and this is how I know it's best practice. Finally, for the challenges, administrative and marketing demands are substantial. There's a lot that goes. A lot of time is spent at your computer that you're not working on client needs, and so it's just additional hours at your computer. And finally, just the good stuff to wrap up. I'm still as passionate about the powerful combination of science statistics as I was when I decided to pursue statistics as a career. And I feel particularly blessed to have the opportunity to contribute to many different life-saving medicines. So this passion is across any industry, right? We know this is true for any industry. Science and statistics is a very powerful combination. I feel particularly blessed to apply that combination in the pharmaceutical industry because I've had the opportunity to contribute to many life-saving medicines. Always learning, never boring, across the spectrum of science, business, regulatory, and statistics. And I've had a steady stream of new people to meet and collaborate with over my career, both in big pharma, but now even probably more so as a consultant. This is a part of my job that I really like. So with that, I'd like to thank you. We're ready to go to lunch, and I'll send it back over to Laura.
Thank you very much, Tara. I appreciate that. It's great talks, everyone. We look forward to really talking more deeply about career journeys, and getting some questions from everyone at the panel session. So we'll break for about a half an hour for lunch. We'll come back it'll be 9:30 Pacific, 12:30 Eastern. And we'll start with our panel. Thank you, everyone.
And then people, can you guys hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I think we can go ahead, just, people can just speak up, or if there are more people who have questions, just raise your hand and we can call your name. Or if you have, I hope not, but if you have any technical, audio issue that you cannot unmute yourself, and then just put your question in the chat box, and Laura and I will be watching the chat, and then we'll bring up your questions. Shall we give people another minute or so?
Hi, this is Joanne. I have a question for all the panelists, and thank you very much. This was fantastic. So I find that in my career as a CMC statistician or a data scientist, I have to be my own advocate for the value that I bring. So I'd like to know your perspective on how to do that at different stages in your careers. Because I think, for the students in the room, I think it's important for them to understand that that starts on day one.
I don't know about others. That's a big question. I mean, I can throw a few things. I mean, my experience, one is like, I don't think it's easy. I think it's very difficult if we try to do it on our own. My experience work with the stakeholder, the scientists, your customer you actually work with to try. Sometimes they can try to help you, come out with something, to better explain the value. For example, the cost saving, the time saving from the lab perspective. That's something I think we as statistician or data science very hard to get, but they can somehow, by working with them, at least for some case studies, we can somehow get certain information. Okay, I see. Kim and Stan both raise their hand. Please go ahead. Either one, yeah.
Me, I couldn't tell. I can't see everybody on the screen. I mean, it's a very good question, and I spent a lot of my career, pondering the same question. I'll have to say that I now say, and I learned mid-career, that while it might be useful that the consulting statistician as an individual be able to influence without question, it's really up to senior leadership for the person to speak with the senior leadership of the partner functions in the organization to establish a let's call it a more likely association, not just by happenstance when a person feels like coming or when you're talking with somebody in the hall, although those are always good. If you really want you know, to have your department be used when they should be used, hopefully not when they needn't be used, and so forth and so on. That conversation needs to happen at upper management levels. And at Merck, we were successful at that. We had, during our training, senior vice presidents come to our training and say that they should listen to what we say, because that person was not going to accept any science that they did that would result, let's say, in a several $1,000,000 investment, unless they worked with a statistician to design and analyze the experiments that were used to decide to make that investment. So there was some talk earlier on about the value of statistics. Well, the value is to establish, for lack of a better term, the probability of success or not, and multiply that times the cost or the benefit of whatever it is that's being studied. So because they hold the purse strings, you know, maybe the realization that the people with the purse strings should be approached to try to promote better statistical science in order to make their decisions.
I'll just add, in my role now, I agree with you. In the big pharma company, it does require that senior level management to even fund an organization of statisticians. And you do need sponsorship for people to know what you can do for the organization. That's really critical. In my world as a consultant now, and actually in my world when I worked in big pharma, it really relied on the individual to be able to translate business benefit. Not only, I didn't comment on this in my discussion, not only do they sometimes think they don't need a statistician, but quite often, you know, the quote I had in there, I'm not a statistician. Quite often people think, well, I can do this. That's a challenge in our career, that people always say, well, I can do statistics because I took a statistics class, or I have a black belt, so I'm essentially a statistician. And so we, in addition to saying, do you need statistics at all? Sometimes people say, well, I can do this. I've got JUMP, right? But so I think you really have to be able to translate very directly what the business benefit is. If you do this, this is what will happen. If you don't do this, this is what will happen. Here's the business benefit and risk. You know, you make the decision, and if you're able to do that, they're going to choose the value. I see it particularly in small companies because they don't have the time nor the funds to be not really focusing on value-added activities.
But do they do the calculation, Tara? Does the grassroots statistician and the laboratory scientist have the information to understand the true cost or the true benefit of the decisions that are being made? That's usually made at a higher level. In a smaller organization, it might be that they do have some view on what the cost of their decisions are going to be, but in principle, that's not known at the laboratory and or at the CMC statistician level. We can give the probabilities, but they need to be translated into what's really meaningful to the organization.
I think that quite often they know what a certain action or lack thereof will cost them. It will cost them time. It will cost them, you know, real simply, more experiments. It will cost them a compliance risk. They know, the scientists and people that we work with quite often clearly know. They're empowered to know what the business benefit is. They're not going to be the person that says, yeah, we're going to have this great big program, right? But they're certainly going to say, that statistician gave me a way to make sure that in the future we won't have this sort of issue, whatever that might be.
Thanks, Tara. I saw our panelists, Sean, Brandy, and both raise their hands. So Sean, please go ahead, unmute yourself.
great, because I think they highlight two parts to the question. The first part is, that accepted intrinsic value, showing up to the table and being valued for the strength of the discipline that you bring. But then the other part, I think, Joanne, you were alluding to, is sort of self-advocacy. And I mean, sort of thinking about that intrinsic value of the role, I think that does come from the sharing the business need, sharing sort of great examples. So as leaders and or individual contributors in the organization, so it's sort of, encourage you to share with your managers, your leaders, stories of success and what they've done, because stories are a great way to sort of get people excited, and especially, and even if the outcome isn't necessarily, it could be that you've advanced a failure faster and more cheaply, that's always also good as well. So I think I just encourage you to share those nuggets and those stories. I think on the more, yourself as a person, as a leader, I think self-advocacy isn't necessarily unique to this field. I think it's one of those challenges innately for a lot of folk as they're developing their careers. And one way I think to overcome the sense of being self-advocating as self-promoting is to think around sharing your experience and sharing sort of, again, business challenges viewed as a service to others rather than leading from ego or self. And so, as a personal suggestion, it's always helpful if you can frame what you did or what your team did as solving a business problem or addressing a key need in the business, and or bringing your experience to bear and addressing that. I do think that also helps others see the intrinsic self worth that you have as well as individuals. So just a couple of suggestions and thoughts from me.
Thank you so much, Sean. Brandy, please go ahead.
Hi, great question, Joanne. And I struggle with that question quite a bit. I know at Merck, if I'm trying to figure out how to lower my hand at the same time here. I know at Merck, if I have I need help with the design of experiments, there is the Center for Mathematical Sciences that I would go to, and I would get advice on how to, if I split plot or full factorial or my favorite central composite design. But if I need to add value to a product or calculate a return on investment, there's not a financial mathematical sciences group that could do that type of ROI calculation for me. And I just feel that sometimes we're put in the position where not only we have to, be project managers, but we also need the skill set of knowing the finances and how to calculate these things. One thing that has been brought up to me, and it's a different approach clearly, because you would, not necessarily talking about the sponsorship, which you definitely need. But I think about when I deploy a model, I have to imagine for the life cycle of that model. So I need to have triggers. I need to have triggers to tell me when I need to update that model. So I'll have model outlier diagnostics and so forth that tell me these things. Like if I can train it so the model can tell me when I need to, do another calibration of it or retrain it, can I also have that same model track the cost savings at the same time to see, how much is saved? Because I can easily put in, the cost of the materials, because I can access, these types of systems now. So I'm going to try to start doing that and have my own business metrics associated with the model, just like I would with the outlier diagnostics for, tracking the validation state of it. So anyway, just some thoughts.
Thanks, Brandy. Samuel, anything you want to share from your end?
I can't hear you, Samuel. You're talking on mute.
Oh, I think you're on mute.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I want to say here at BMS, so I'm kind of like a unique like a situation in terms of like an organization. So I belong to the global biometrics and the data science team, which includes like the data science and the clinical stat and also CMC biostat in cell therapy. But our all like stakeholders and the colleagues are in the cell therapy development and operation division. So it's hard to like kind of let them know like our like the value as like the same like the stat to the like the senior leadership level for both the operation branch and also like our like the quantitative science branch as well. So but one of like my experience with the out of spec calculation. So I think that's a kind of like one of the work we can highlight as a like the example directly linked to our like the business respect. So nowadays like the senior leadership, especially in the business side, they are looking at some like the predicted out of spec rate based on the commercial spec. So we provide the entire the analysis and the calculation based on the different scenarios. So those kind of information is really critical for like the business like department, the business organization to make a decision. So I think that's a good example as like the CMC statistician to add some like the values from a business perspective.
Thanks, Laura, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to add, I think back to something that Sean said. I think and even someone before, it's really just important, I think, to show through examples of partnership, solving problems together, how here's an example of how I can help, especially when you're in a small organization, people that don't interact with statisticians every day and maybe do think, I have jump, I've been doing this without you. Showing how you can help, approaching a problem in a way that says, oh, hey, I see that you've been doing this way. Let me show you maybe a different way to think about this, or how can we think about this together? And building some allies that can also advocate for you. So you're not the only one that is out there trying to, advocate for your value in the organization. Building those allies and strengthening those partnerships can help as well.
I saw a couple of questions from the chat box, so I'll just go ahead and bring those up. I think this is related to the data science organization. So there are 3 questions. Number 1, how many employees belong to the data science organization? If it's possible, could you explain your organization with the brief organization chart? The second one, do you have data architecture function in the data science organization also? Is there any company that operate the organization separately, architecture and analysis separately? If so, how do you operate the data work efficiently? The third one is, I heard something that the career path of data science, data architect linked to data and analysis. I just want to hear the expert opinion about this. This general career path for data science, is this a general career path for data science? If possible, I want to have some discussion about the detailed career path for architects and analysts. So those are a couple of questions related to the data science career paths and also organization wise, how data science is embedded in different organizations, the operating model, etc. I don't know if anyone in the panel or anyone in the audience want to share, their experience from different companies.
So I'll offer my 2 cents on that. So let me begin my remarks by stating that from a technology standpoint, I spent many years working primarily with SaaS and developing not only statistical models and analysis applications using SAS, but I even went so far as to develop standalone validated applications that ran within a CGMP environment. And there was one point as a SAS programmer, I was heavily involved with SAS user groups, both regionally and nationally. And there was a point around maybe 2012 to 2014 where I began to deal with this very question of weighing in with my colleagues in the SAS programming space that we needed to devote more time and attention within our conferences to the fundamental infrastructure supporting the work that we do as data analysts. And the reason why is that I began to see at that time that many of the limitations that I often would encounter in terms of, for example, extracting certain manufacturing data from an OSI Pi system or a LIMS system within a QC environment or something like that. A lot of times I was limited in terms of the value of the data that I would be directly accessing and trying to analyze because of inherent design elements, whereby at the time of implementation, the system didn't really consider the particular use cases, especially from a data analysis perspective, and the kinds of business questions that would drive an analyst to look at certain raw data elements in a certain kind of way. And so because those use cases had not been considered at the time of development and then subsequent validation, it limited in some way the utility of the data after implementation, and that required, various forms of, jury-rigged solutions to try to answer questions outside of that validated system rather than within the framework, which would be the optimal way of doing so. So I say all of that to say that I recognize, I think, what the questions are driving at in terms of greater consideration of architecture. It seems to me that in order for this to be given adequate attention, it requires an individual who understands that, but also positions themselves then to a role within an IT organization in particular and help expand the mindset of IT so as to understand how crucial data analysis is with respect to the considerations they factor into account when considering a product for implementation, when seeking to validate it, so on and so forth. Because oftentimes the IT organizations, they're relying on the business to inform them on what requirements need to be met. But if the data analysis / statistician sector is not captured within the business community that articulates those requirements, then that's going to be then not factored into the final product, and that's going to cause problems down the road. So there is a need from a career positioning standpoint for certain individuals to embed themselves, I think, within the IT organizations, but still have that strong analytical background to help expand the purview of IT, the vision of IT to service analysis or analysts in a much greater capacity.
Thanks, Jeff. Stan, do you want to share your perspective?
Well, I hope I'm not interrupting the flow of comments by the panelists in responding to that question. I actually had something totally unrelated. So when you're finished, come back to me, okay?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I saw you raise your hand earlier. I'll come back to you. Sean, would you like to share something from your end?
Yeah, sure. I can maybe do it at a high level and just again so that we've got time for other questions and thoughts. And I know Brandy has her hand up too. I mean, maybe I can sort of talk broadly about our Biogen data sciences organization, sort of in totality, and then maybe break it down by the different parts as the sort of the brief org chart question. So we have about 220 staff in our analytics and data sciences organization. So we're a mid-sized company, so I think that's proportional to probably the size that we need. And we have colleagues in a biostatistics and real-world data analytics organization, and that is our integrated organization in which our non-clinical statistics team sits. So really right alongside the clinical trial statistics, as well as alongside our team using different real-world data sources for real-world data analytics. And that team in its entirety is about 80 people. So just to give a relative sort of, that's a strong number of folk in that function. We also have a programming team. The programming team are maybe more on the sort of traditional SaaS programming side of things, because they're in our regulated reporting for the sort of clinical trial reporting. We do have a data sciences team of about 10 people, and they are our sort of data science group that are really utilizing different programming languages and bringing those forward to help different approaches to sort of some of the questions we have. And that team often work very closely with our non-clinical statistics team together. The non-clinical stats team bringing the statistical methodology and framework, and that team perhaps bringing the RHI and IABS or Markdown or different Python solutions depending on the data source. And then we have a standards organization as well. And then we have a data management team. So that's kind of, our org chart in brief. But maybe I'll take the second part of the question next, which was around specifically data architecture. So we don't have a data architecture function specifically, but I think about data architecture maybe in three different ways. I think about it as standards, so the implementation of standard nomenclature ontologies for the different data types as needed. Data stewardship, so again ensuring sort of the fair principles and the reusability of that data. So we do have standards and stewardship working in concert together in our standards organization. And then Jeff's touching on that point of systems, because at some stage, when you're moving or integrating data around, there is a need for sort of really good data systems to give the architecture for that. So we've got a number of different solutions that either sort of aggregate and sort of aggregation layers and or potentially, ways of integrating the different data sets that we work in. And again, with software such as, and with the R suite of tools, again, you don't need quite so much architecture there. But we don't necessarily, I will say our shortcoming is we don't have such a great data pipelining tool across all of the different data types. So that is something where we continue to work with our IT partners on to create a much better data ecosystem. And maybe I'll sort of leave it there rather than touching on the third question there around career pathways. But, because I'm sure there'll be some other discussion points coming up, but if we can always come back to that one as well. I'm happy to sort of share some thoughts around movement across different careers.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. Brandy, I saw you had your hand raised. Do you still?
Yeah. As a data scientist from Merck, I just thought I would briefly explain our organization. We're data scientists are scattered throughout the company. Just a quick glance. We've got data scientists within biostatistics, informatics, outcomes research, project management, quality assurance. I'm in a group that's called digital services, which is data analytics, user experience, and knowledge management. I would say there has to be hundreds of us. We are a large company. And there is within my division, we are the centralized data science group. I can't really speak too much to the other divisions, but that there are lots of data scientists with different objectives. The data architecture, so speaking within my specific group, which is the manufacturing division, we do have, in addition to the group I'm in, digital services, we have a foundational services, architecture, engineering, and compliance group. And in regards to your third question, I really don't know how to answer that one. So I'll leave that as I don't know.
Thank you, Brandy. And before we move on to different topic, is there anybody else want to share more about the data science career path? For example, data architecture versus data analyst, and also within your own organization how things are working. with those different data science functions. I hope that so far that, the insight brought by the panelists provides some good answer to Jason, your question. But is there anything else people want to add on this topic? Okay, if not, I'd like to come back to Stan, and then Maria, you'll be the next.
Okay, thanks, Ruja. I wanted to first say how much I enjoyed the panelists on their career journeys. Everyone spoke in such a clear way about their challenges and how much they enjoyed the journey. Really came across in a nice way. So congratulations on that. I had two questions, one for Brandy and one for Sarah. For Brandy, you talked about your starting out in chemometrics and then from chemometrics moving on into data science and having interactions with statisticians and so on. I'm interested in knowing, in my own dealings with data science and chemometrics people, chemometricians in particular, like when they're designing their calibration studies and so on, I find that they don't really exploit good experimental design principles. I'd be interested in hearing your comment on that. And then the second question is for Sarah, also an outstanding talk. Sarah, you mentioned you started out as a math major and then you went into biostatistics. You came out of a biostatistics program and then became a CMC statistician. Now, biostatistics programs in general don't really teach statistics in ways that, in my opinion, really conform nicely with the needs of a CMC statistician. So I'm just wondering, can you just comment on what challenges you might have faced in your work as a CMC statistician and how you were able to manage to do that despite your training in biostatistics, which is essentially clinical statistics. You probably know that better than I do. So those are my two questions. Thank you, Roja.
Thank you, Stan. Great question. Brandy, you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you. That's challenging but good question. So I would say in regards to chemometrics, I would work closely with statisticians because we would start off. My idea was that you would have concurrent development. So we would work with the process engineers. So as they were developing their manufacturing process, I was developing the analytical tests that would be put into that process. And we would combine our efforts in design of experiments such that we were able to leverage the same type of data. And that was the only way we could get the quality data that we needed to build the models and do the ultimate goal, which would be the real-time release testing or in-process control. So as a chemometrician, I did a lot of DOE stuff. Now that I'm a data scientist, it's like, this is the data. This is what you have to work with. And they like to use this, big data is that you don't need a DOE because every possible scenario has been exploited in real big data. But I don't have that. I don't have big data. I have wide data. It can be very big in that it's wide, but I don't have a lot of observations. So I don't really find that point valid. And I struggle with trying to make the most with what we have without having those designs. But I would also have to say that some of the work that I've done as a data scientist is to create tools for the process engineers and the analytical chemists to better design experiments by kind of doing simulations so they know which variables that they can explore. So I hope that answers the question. I'm a big fan of experimental design. It definitely would make my job as a data scientist easier. I always joked in pharmaceuticals, The only person that wants a failed batch is a chemometrician or data scientist because it gives us more of a design space. But anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Brent.
Thanks, Brenda. Sarah?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question. Clearly, I think I bounced around a lot in education, and I ended up choosing the biostatistics degree and switching from, straight up statistics to biostatistics because I enjoyed the application. It's not because I had to do clinical trials or, that was the most interesting thing. To be honest, in my experience anyways, I feel like academia, at least at the PhD level for statistics, biostatistics, doesn't necessarily train you to go into industry. I feel like I'm very much trained to be a researcher. So even had I gone into the clinical side and came to a pharmaceutical company, I wasn't taught CDISC standards or how to write a statistical analysis plan or all of these things that are required for these types of jobs. I think there would have been, just as much learning, honestly, on that side as this side, whereas, we're having to learn, USP type, recommendations and FDA guidance. So all these things I think is still something that had to be learned regardless. And, coming into the CMC world, from really straight from academia, but also from being trained more to look at human subject type research. I found it interesting regardless, especially considering my experience at the USDA ARS. I think that was something that utilized a lot of design of experiments. And believe it or not, like that's not something that was really included in my education and PhD. I did take that type of class in my master's for mathematics. But I did learn clinical trial type designs in the PhD. I think it has a lot of learning regardless, but there's definitely been many interesting challenges along the way. And I think learning the business has been the biggest and the hardest, and I'm still learning every single day, and every scientist I talk to, I really appreciate them letting me ask what I call all the silly questions. But yeah, that's just maybe hopefully answering some of your question, but I'm sure I could elaborate for days.
Yes, Sarah, do you think that the CMC statistics profession and as a group could do a better job of communicating future opportunities in CMC space to graduate students in programs like yours?
100%. I had no idea there was anything beyond clinical statistics. And I was making these, I think, broad generalizations in my head that was the only thing that pharmaceutical companies had. And then in my mind, like in the financial type region, there's like, okay, there's, time series and predicting the market, but I'm sure there's way more than just these at face value. And I had no idea. And I think I maybe mentioned too, most of my contacts and people I was comfortable and familiar with were my advisor, were other professors and, students. And so they're not familiar with this area. And, looking at my training as biostatistics, I do think CMC is a part of like this huge biostatistics umbrella, honestly. And it's something that is completely left out of our training or even thoughts, because to be honest, I don't know if I went and spoke to professors, if they knew this world existed.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Stan. Those are really excellent questions.
I'm just going to add a little funny thing to Sarah's. I don't even think the clinical statisticians within a big pharma company know about the group of CMC statisticians that exists in the same company. So I'm not surprised that certainly the professors would not know about this whole group. We don't even know within, and I think, Catherine, you could speak up if you're online and say whether or not when you were a clinical statistician at Merck, were you aware that there CMC statisticians existed?
No, I was coming up to find my unmute button. No, I was in the giant clinical stats group. We were in a different division at Merck, but no, aside from, Tim's group, which just was assays, which was in the research division we knew about, but the CMC statisticians in manufacturing, no, I didn't even know they existed. And as Sarah said, when I was in graduate school, I mean, I had a concentration in biostatistics, and I agree with everything she said. That was what I knew you could do as a career in pharmaceuticals was biostats. But also, to her point, it's not like that. I mean, there was some of certainly the coursework was relevant, but I had to learn a lot about how to do the job once I got there. And I think that's true for any job, right? So I was still able to make the transition to non-clinical because I, understood the industry by the time I was doing that and had the basic grounding and the statistical tools that I was going to need to be a CMC statistician. But yeah, so all those things.
Yeah, I think the main concern I have is what Sarah mentioned, that she didn't have any design experience as a graduate student, and that's what you really need in CMC. And I was just wondering, how did she overcome that? And I think the answer is she learned it on the job.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of learning on the job, referencing, my Doug Montgomery book from my master's program for design of experiments, and also too, I think leveraging that experience at the USDA to where, these agricultural experiments, I did do, design and analysis there. So I did have, that experience aside, but that was not a part of the formal PhD training.
Yeah, which is fairly typical of biostat programs in general.
So Stan, just to add a little bit to it, from my experience, back in the graduate school, we did learn design, but in a very, very theoretical manner. So we learned the theory behind the thing, but until, only after I really joined the industry, start doing something, I realized, that's what it looked like in real life. That's what you do in the real job. You set up a simple design like that. I totally wasn't aware when I was back at school learning all the theory in the textbook. I had no idea what it really looked like when it's being applied. It was
that's the other extreme, Rojan.
Mm-hmm. Vanita, I saw your research. I want to comment on the same, or do you have a different question?
No, I want to kind of follow up with the same thing, that it is very true that non-clinical, biostatisticians who work on the clinical side don't know and understand what a CMC statistics is. They really don't understand anything outside of the clinical space. They do have a really good attitude and a chip on their shoulder that they do clinical stats, though I believe that there are enough challenges and there's enough variety on the non-clinical side that they don't have to deal with. They don't deal with any of that. And some of them actually even refuse to even try to find out. They don't have curiosity. They don't want to know. I've come across some statisticians though who are curious and they want to, they've asked me that, oh, you're a CMC statistician, what does that mean? What do you really do? And it's an eye-opener for them. Going back to school, it is true that, we've talked in different forums about how do we raise awareness among the grad students and undergrad students about CMC stats. It is, I think, really important. I have given some talks and, gone back to my university and given talks about what I do and, how passionate I'm about and the difference we make in patients' lives, in addition to being a clinical statistician. But I think we need to do a little bit more. And in terms of the training, when I went to school, which was, about 10, 15, 20 years ago now, I'm dating myself, there were DOE classes, but I think in more recent years, they're not offering those anymore in school. They're switching more towards data science, data sciences. So when we are looking at the fresh graduates coming out from university, they are not trained in any of the DOE or advanced even the regression analysis. So I think we are seeing less and less of that happening in universities. We need to make people aware of CMC stats and also stress the importance of those courses to be continued on in the advanced linear algebra and DOE training. So thank you.
Yeah, Vanita, that's a very important comment, and one that's been reflected in the industry, in the profession in general. This year's JSM in Washington, D.C., for example, there were no sessions on DOE. In the past, we would typically have at least one or more than one intensive session on design of experiments, and this year there were none. Again, I think an influence of data science on us.
I think, Stan, one of the reasons is I have stopped going to JSM. They're so huge and they don't offer, at least I didn't find enough I could claim to attend it in terms of, as a CMC statistician. But maybe that is not right. Maybe we should be putting together more sessions rather than dropping it out. Maybe, we should be putting together more sessions so that it's worth for all of us to go and attend a JSM again.
Sure, yeah, we should consider that.
Tim, do you want to follow up on that, or do you have a different question?
Yeah, I would like to follow up. I'm not going to go much into it, Stan, but I think you realize that it's a supply and demand problem as far as the university program system is concerned. There's a huge demand for clinical statisticians, and we're, I think we're all familiar with, and actually rue the fact that there's not a whole lot of demand for CMC statisticians. So unless we can elevate ourselves within our companies to force universities to engage in programs to supply CMC statisticians at the university level, then we're sort of lost. But as far as coming out of a university and engaging in CMC statistics, I came out of a business program. I came out of the Wharton School. I saw problems when I was in the Wharton School that related to what I was more interested in, which is the biological or chemical sciences, but there was nothing there. So I think several of the panel have said that they've learned on the job, and that's exactly what I did. My best education, perhaps my only education, was on the job when it had to do with context. But I did learn in going through the program, and they say this for all PhD programs, I learned how to learn. I learned how to ask questions. I learned to take interest in the things that I was trying to solve problems for and things like that. I learned analytical thinking was, I guess, the easiest way to express it. And regardless of the program you go through, a business program like I did, or a clinical program like most biostatisticians are likely to go through, you learn sort of how to think analytically, I hope at least. And then the context comes with, getting into happening into the right job. I call it the right job because I am so lucky to have gotten into CMC and actually brought more broadly non-clinical statistics. So universities are not going to help us until we start to create a demand. But I think we should value what we have learned in any program we've been through, which is to have been trained in analytical thinking.
Good point, Tim. Thanks.
Rick, do you want to follow up on that, or do you have a new question?
Yeah, just to continue on here. I think, again, some of the tools that we're looking for, it sounds like we're looking more in maybe departments where they don't stress those, but there are tools taught in a lot of them. The industrial engineering and the engineering colleges in particular do a lot of focus on that, and folks with background in manufacturing can be found in that area. So I think probably in my mind the best thing to do to bring those people in and then teach them the biology and the chemistry and let them learn that rather than looking in programs that are primarily biology, and chemistry, and then expecting them to educate the person in some of these quantitative tools. So I guess that's the way I look at CMC. And when I first heard about it, I taught at Arizona State University for 30 years and really didn't know much. I was teaching in a business school, and we had a master's program in statistics I oversaw. We worked jointly with Doug Montgomery's group over in engineering, and then the folks in math. But what's interesting is several of our graduates actually got into the CMC industry, and I didn't know anything about it. And then once I started working in the industry, I came across a couple of these graduates of mine who were like really far up in their companies. And it was really an eye-opening experience for me. As a faculty member, as someone said, you don't always know what these job opportunities are, but you can look to the universities to, again, teach the tools you look for. Don't worry so much about department names or that kind of thing. Just look for the tools that you need and then bring them into the company.
Thanks. Jose, I'll put you on hold just before just a little bit. Maria has a question in the chat. I want to go to that one. So she has a question: how to promote the data model governance within a organization to eliminate silos? Is that even an easy task? Anyone want to share your experience?
So I don't know if this really answers your question, Maria, and you can let me know. It's really two parts. We try really hard to have people learn about tidy data. And we're trying to get everybody to think about their data and the way it's structured, and to think about experimentation before they run their experiments here. So it's a huge educational piece. And then as far as model governance goes, I like to think there's a lot of flexibility in the kind of models that you can use. But the simple things we try to enable the scientists to do themselves through, again, education, training, and enablement with software. But we're hoping that they come to us for problems that are outside of their own purview. And that's an educational piece too, for them to recognize what they can and cannot do. I don't know if that really answers the question, but that's where we start with data and data model governance here.
That kind of answers the question, thanks. It's just that the struggle that I have is when the scientists bring their data set, it's almost like, oh, if you follow some of the systematic approach on how you want to collect the data, that's like extra work, like that,
right?
Like having the data model plan out. So just wondering.
Yeah, and we've seen a nice, it's not perfect because I get all kinds of data, but we've seen data coming a little bit better, since we've rolled out tidy data standards, and they have like a packet to refer to for all of that.
Oh, that's a great suggestion. Thanks.
Brandy, do you want to follow up on this topic, or do you have something new?
No, I was on just say something on this topic. So is it an easy task? No. In my experience, no, it is not. But if you do it, then it makes everything so much easier because you can reuse data and you can access it and you understand it and you don't make mistakes like modeling data and the manufacturing process wasn't even going on at that time. So, it helps with stuff of that nature. But I clearly don't need to explain that to you if you want to develop that. We have not necessarily data model, but we have data governance. And one thing that I wanted to say is that that's really like one of our big pillars within our data science community is that. And I'm learning a lot about taxonomy now in regards to having to do data governance. We actually have taxonomy experts within our knowledge management that help us do the tagging so people can find our models that are interested and reuse them.
Great to know. Sean, do you also want to comment on this?
I'll just add, sort of, I put my hand up as Brandy was speaking around sort of that as well. We don't have a data model governance per se, but we do have data governance. And again, similar principles is sort of making sure that where there are the standard models, deploying those, but where there are perhaps not necessarily standard models per se, but there are either well-used ontologies, taxonomies, or otherwise that can interoperate and talk together, that we're sort of ensuring that. I think, one of the areas we're very much focused on the reusability and the FAIR principles, both for the data itself, but any of the models that subsequently are developed. And our data governance is multidisciplinary as well. So it does feature the different parts of the organization, through our researchers, as well as our pharmaceutical organization. So I guess it's good representation. And integrated thinking to try and eliminate the silos. Within our pharmaceutical organization, we do have a team focused a little bit further deeper into sort of not necessarily data model per se, but definitely sort of there are some pockets of analytics organizations through our non-clinical, through our POT organization again, and we sort of represent those and integrate with those teams as well, again, just to sort of bust through the silos. But it's definitely not easy. And I think I mentioned, one of the challenges that Jeff had alluded to earlier is also, there's an element of the thinking that you can do and the stewardship, but at some stage there are systems as well. And so, our shortcoming is we haven't necessarily got the integration of systems. So there's a little bit of ingestion and aggregation that still goes on in order to really actually do the work itself. But it's certainly a roadmap and a journey that we're working. Hopefully that helps us.
Thanks. Julia, do you also want to follow up on this?
Sure. Yeah, on the data governance, to eliminate silos, I think at Moderna we've had a very unusual situation where we are still quite a small organization, and the silos are just, hopefully forming only slowly. But I think it's still been challenging to collaborate across functional areas because organizationally, we're not designed to do that. However, we've had the advantage of very clear unifying objectives across the whole organization. And so in particular, for establishing patient-centric specifications, one of the things that supports that is connecting CMC and clinical data and non-clinical data as well. And so we have been able to connect data across those or across organizations to accomplish that shared purpose. But I think the challenge we're trying to understand now, and that I'm learning a lot from in this discussion, is how do you make that built into the organization so as we get bigger and bigger, it still is a goal we can achieve sustainably.
Julie, I didn't know you were still here, but I was going to call you out for the one experience we had at Merck where you undertook a data acquisition and management system. It was problem specific, but what challenges did you meet in setting that up? Because as I recall, it was an excellent job. There was never one like it before, so you didn't have a model for doing it. So how did you discipline the manufacturing area into building such a structure?
Oh, thank you, Tim. That's nice of you to say. So I'm guessing you're thinking of there were two stages to it. At Merck, of course, for viral vaccines, we had a very rich legacy of data for decades of viral vaccine manufacturing, but it was entirely on paper at the time I began working there. And a batch record, a typical batch record for one of the products I worked on was 1,500 pages of paper. There were actually several, I shouldn't laugh, but it's so crazy. There were several work-related injuries from people carrying batch records around during the time that I was there. So we in 2 stages, we took on converting those records to a digital system so that we could look, connect the quality outcome results, the CQA and other attributes to the process parameters and other measures of how manufacturing was run. And that was at first driven by a massive investigation, I'm sure you remember, where we had a year's worth of production for one vaccine that was in quarantine. And eventually much of that was unfortunately discarded. And we had not been able to get to root cause. So getting all of that data into a digital system drove it. So there were a couple of things that would probably be of interest to this group here. I'd say the one that comes to my mind first is finding the right data architect with the right attitude. And I'll never forget the guy that he would drive us all crazy working with him, but he got things done. And one time he said, "We can validate anything." So to find someone with that mindset who just figures out a way to validate a system to maintain the key data with high integrity, that's really essential. But another thing we did is we learned from the investigation about which parameters were actually important to digitize, because with 1,500 pages per lot, clearly not all of that data was worth digitizing. And we needed a way to figure out what the high priorities were. So we actually used the modeling effort, which was done by a team of us from joint backgrounds in statistics, a lot of chemometricians, and computational scientists as well. I think we'd probably call them data scientists today. So we worked together to figure out what were the high priority parameters, and that allowed us to prioritize getting the data set up in a structure. And from there, it was brute force of working with our partner who could validate anything, but being able to give him a very clear prioritized list of here are the things that really need to get in there and locked down. That other 40 pages you can skip.
Well, it's unfortunate, and I do remember it, that it was a crisis.
Yes.
Not a sort of a prospective objective in management to go across functions to establish a database that could be used not only for investigations, but for learning how to improve the process for that matter. But that would be the vision. But
yes. Oh, but I forgot to mention, thank you for reminding me, is that the crisis was what got us to do it the first time, and the reason we could get resources to do it the first time. But we built on that. It was right around the time that continued process verification was becoming an expectation. So we said, hey, this thing we just did for a crisis could be applied proactively to avoid those situations in the future and to enable us to do continued process verification. So we actually took that same working model and applied it for setting up databases for CPV for all the vaccines and after that Keytruda.
So Brandy, you have to Google the internal Merck network for the name O'Neill to find out what the threads are towards having more than just wide data, but big data.
Well, Luisa Vando was a key partner on that one.
Yeah, I was going to say I've had the pleasure of working with Julia. She's quite famous.
Uh-oh.
Okay, thank you. Jose, thanks for your patience. Now it's your turn.
No problem. I want to echo the sentiments and thank all of you for being so open and sharing not only your career story, but also some of your life stories. I want to add a third category to the ones Jeff mentioned. And these are the people that are comfortable in both environments, the people that know the methodology, the theory, can develop new things. And they're also not afraid of getting their hands dirty and collaborating with scientists and engineers. And the example I'm going to give you is the late Professor Box, which was one of the greatest statisticians of the 20th century. A couple of years ago, I gave a talk on Professor Box and Sir Ronald Fisher. When he worked at Imperial Chemical Industries in England, they had an issue that they want to increase the yield of their processes. And he had no issues going down to the manufacturing floor, to the reactors, and working with chemical engineers and scientists. And not only he was able to increase the yield by several percentage points, and he became an internal hero at the company, but he developed the theory of response surface methodology and the central composite designs, the CCD that Brandon mentioned, and also the theory of experimental design. We've been talking about DOE and how do we don't have the training and all that. He was instrumental on porting that technology, so to speak, from the agricultural side that Fisher did to the industrial statistics environment. When he was at Princeton, he continued working with engineers in matters of automatic process control. And that's how he developed the theory of time series and the book that he wrote. Not only that, he also wrote a book on Bayesian statistics. And on top of that, he was recognized as a fellow of the Royal Society. And some of you are familiar with that, but if you're not, the Royal Society is an institution where the fellows are awarded that honor if they had made substantial contributions to what they call natural knowledge. And that is mathematics, physics, science, engineering, and medicine. Yeah. So, I mean, we're working with people that are pushing the medical and biotech technologies. I mean, going inside the T cells and working with CD4s and CD19s. So I believe we need people that are comfortable in both environments that can also push statistical science. That's all.
Thank you, Jose. Julia, do you have your hand raised for another comment? Or... Julia, I think you still have your hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to lower my hand.
Okay.
I'll do that now.
I wasn't sure. Okay. So we have about, we only have a few. I think we are supposed to end at 1:45, so about 8 minutes. Okay, as long as I think we can pose one of maybe the last question to all the to everyone. Laura proposed one ending question. What is some of the most important advice you have received during your career? That is a really good one. So anyone want to share your story? Brandy?
So when I was at GlaxoSmithKline, I had a mentor and they put me with a VP of HR, and I did not understand why. I thought I should be with a chemist or statistician or anybody but an HR person. And he taught me this bit of advice that I love to tell this story. So anyway, he said, what really makes me laugh about you scientists is that you're always competing with one another in regards to who's the smartest. He goes, everybody that works at this company is smart. You don't need to compete in that regards. You're all smart. he goes, if you want to be successful though, you've got to be able to work with people. And he goes, so that is the most important aspect of it. So anyway, I've always enjoyed that piece of advice.
That is a really good one. Anyone else want to share yours about the best advice you have ever received? Jeff?
I would just say the best piece of advice I received probably was it was within my very first week ever working in this industry, and that advice was simply, this is a small industry, so treat everyone the best you possibly can. And it's very, very true. I think Tim alluded to it earlier that when he kind of talked about the supply and demand aspect of education and the preparation academia lens toward, granting individuals the credentials necessary to enter this space. It is a very small community within CMC statistics in particular. It's a community I personally have valued highly throughout my years, but it's also very, very small. And the industry is a small industry. And so as you progress going forward, you're going to find yourself crisscrossing paths again and again with individuals who have worked in various capacities in your past life. And so there may be some difficult challenges you encounter from time to time, but keep in mind how well you handle those challenges today will have significant ripple effects tomorrow in terms of what your work experience will be.
Great, thanks. I love this. Carol, please.
I think that, and this is somewhat related to Brandy's, the HR guy's comments. We talked about, how do we have to be our own advocates, and that's true of everything, but we are in a place where people often say, well, I don't know why I need a statistician. And we have to have a thick skin sometimes because they might not even want us there. As we've said, they think they can do it. And so just generally speaking, I've had various people throughout my career talk about EQ, right? Emotional quotient instead of IQ. And I think in this support function, right, we are in a support function most of the time. We're not the chemical engineers that are putting the stuff in the reactors or designing the tests, or we're the support staff. And so in that case, your EQ has to be really strong in lots of different facets of EQ, not just are you the best statistician or you have the best models or whatever it is.
Yes. Sure.
I think everything that's been said already is all great advice. And just speaking as someone who's moved around multiple different careers, some of the best advice that I've had through those times has been never stop learning, always enjoy the learning journey, and always seek to learn. One of the other things is don't be afraid to try different things. So career paths are very rarely sort of climbing singular rungs vertically on a ladder. So never be afraid to sort of hop onto a different lily pad, maybe take a lateral move, or think about where your skill set can be applied elsewhere. So again, if anything came through from the sort of the highlights of around our team, one of the benefits of being an integrated team is that ability to move between CMC space, biomarker space, sort of pure research, spatial transcriptomics, as well as sort of, as well as in the clinical setting with that sort of different framework. So trying different things is great. And again, I think, Jeff, as Jeff said, this is a small world. So, always treat folk with regard and respect. Because it's a small world and there are changes in this environment. And so, if you ever find yourself sort of seeking a new opportunity, your network will always be there for you if you treat them with regard.
Thanks, Jones. Sarah, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just kind of, I mean, I again agree with a lot of what everyone said. I just kind of wanted to point out my experience a little bit. So joining the CMC world already is a part of a scientific team. Like I wasn't a part of a data science or statistician team. My immediate manager first joining was a downstream scientist. So I think the advice that I got to begin with was really embed yourself within the different scientific groups and build that trust. I know we've talked a lot about upper management and making sure that we have certain resources, but really, echoing on some of the sentiments, it's, building that trust, embedding yourself within the scientists, asking them questions, letting them ask you questions. I think it's really a collaborative effort. And I'd say that was probably one of the more useful advices up front that I got is, just going to all these meetings, really, making the inroads with the scientists. And as of later, I think I've worked along the lines to where I'm needing to not be such a perfectionist and getting something that's efficiently done right versus, it being technically correct and making myself happy. So I think that's something I'm still working through, but those are kind of the two pieces of advice I've found useful so far.
Great. Okay, I think we are right at time. Is there any final message from anybody that you want to share before we wrap up?
Well, hearing you, I guess my final thought, I have a piece of advice that I got, and it's don't think about how you will feel if you don't do something. Think about how you will feel, or don't think about how you will feel if you don't do something. Don't think about those. If you feel like it will be a missed opportunity, then say yes and try it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's okay.
Thank you, Laura. Nice final touch. Okay, it's time to wrap up for today. So, as you know, this today's session is kind of not the standard session for our IABS conference, for our workshop, right? I want to thank Laura for her great leadership, putting this together, and Joanne for working with both of us, doing a lot of the heavy lifting work behind the scenes. So it turns out, I think this kind of experimental type of session turns out to be a great one. I totally enjoyed so much from all the, hearing all the story from all the speakers and all the great discussion in the panel. I really, really enjoyed it. I think we should consider doing more something like that in the future workshops, probably. But yeah, just to wrap up, it's really, it's very fascinating hearing all the great story, and it's very amazing, eye-opening to see, how diverse this community is, right? Think of your background, people who train as statisticians, mathematicians, or biochemists, or data scientists, come from totally different background, end up achieve great success in the CMC world. And then, one thing I find in common is very interesting, like people who end up enjoying doing the CMC type of work are those who enjoy working with people, trying new things, learning new things from each other. And then you don't mind getting their hand dirty, and really dealing with real life, problem rather than more completely purely theoretical things. Those are people who really enjoy working with real people in the real life to, bring drug to the patients. But with that said, I think it's really, I guess we want to highlight this is, after hearing all those stories, it's a small world, and then, we can definitely, and it's based on the we're getting more and more diverse, with all the new, modalities coming and the new skill sets coming from, not just the statistics, well, scientific background, also data science perspective. Now we are, becoming a family with such a diverse, community with all the different backgrounds. We continue to learn from each other. And I like what Laura said at the beginning. It's a world full of exciting opportunities and possibilities. That's work together to continue working in this area. Laura, do you want to add anything before we turn it back to Julia and Christy?
Just to echo the thank you to all of our speakers. I really did enjoy this session. It was something new we tried this year at IABS, so I hope you all enjoyed the session as well. Thank you for sharing your stories and your advice. And have a great afternoon, everyone.
Okay. Before we transition, for tomorrow, right? We are going to have a great session on the advance in the regulatory world. So our speakers from from regulators and also from the industry will share their different perspectives, talking about the new guidelines such as ICH, FDA, and the EMA guidelines, etc. So stay tuned. There will be more exciting talks for tomorrow.
Okay, have a good day then. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.